by the way, your road's going to be closed off. And I couldn't help but think to myself, what will happen to the people on the far end, especially
Yeah.
as it began to snow? But by golly, they pulled them up along the side. But there are these absolutely enormous culverts on the side of the road, and they're all going to have to go down that hill. I have no idea how they're going to do this, but they were still there at about 4:30. Amazing.
Was this a record or something to have this much snow this early?
Well, apparently there was one date earlier, but I don't know
Oh.
whether or not there was this much snow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took a picture to send to my kids. And I said, California, want some company?
I'm just hoping to wait it out till Thursday and wait for the rain to come and dismantle it all so I don't have to shovel it.
Now, the reason I was out looking downtown is because I thought I need milk.
You did not stock up.
I was going to do that yesterday, and my grandkids didn't leave early enough.
I really, really hope it doesn't rain because
Yeah.
we have tents, and then of course all the water, it's along the sidewalks, so there's just water rushing down. Now they said it wasn't a problem to have electrical cords sitting in water if you're
Oh,
outside because there are these heaters going. I'm like, okay.
I wouldn't step in a puddle.
I was like, I'm not touching the cords.
That's why you have to wear your rubber boots because
Yeah,
then
I guess I better get some.
yeah. When
Good
my
thought.
basement flooded, I had to go to the breaker and I was
Oh.
standing in like 3 inches of water. So I pulled over a plastic bin with my rubber boots on. I stood in the plastic bin and then turned the breaker back on, hoping I wasn't going to die.
Good thought.
Shock myself to death and no one would know.
Oh.
That's true. Well, the same thing is happening in so many other areas. So I look,
Yeah.
I don't mean the snow, I mean the voting. That basically showing around the country, they're just huge turnouts for this early voting.
The middle of the afternoon, the state computer system went down on it, the voter system. So we had to start telling people, if you don't want to wait a long time, you might want to come back later. But they were able to recover it and get it back up again. But I imagine it was the load.
Yeah.
They keeping track of how many come through each day?
Yeah, I'm interested in what our number was today because a lot of the cars had two people voting, and it's couples coming through or parent and child, that sort of thing.
This is Janet. I just want to clarify one thing. The WIS vote system took it down because it was slow
Okay.
and add, I don't know, more power to it, more capacity to it. They are the ones that took it down because it was becoming so slow. But hopefully, the improvement that they made by taking it down and bringing it back up will
So kind
not
of
have
like
these problems going forwards.
like a mini upgrade or something like that?
I believe so. Yeah, it was 4:30 when they took it down, and not the prime time to do it, but it was
Yeah.
slow.
Lest we forget.
Oh, so you're providing the flag for us. Okay.
Absolutely.
Hi, everybody. This is Judy with the sound check.
We can hear
Sound
you.
good, Judy.
You look marvelous and you sound marvelous.
Hi, Sandra.
Hello. Why is my screen flashing? Colleen, you're just.
Pardon?
Wow. Well, that'll be hard to watch all night.
Yeah,
Samantha, do you know anything about that?
What is it doing?
The larger picture is jumping.
Hmm.
Like between people or just while it's sitting there?
No, whoever comes on the screen, the larger vision is jumping up and down. I go to small picture, it does do that.
Say so. I love your background.
Thanks.
I'll just stay with the small pictures.
This is a reminder for all users that are calling in, please mute your personal devices. Andrew, is it any better?
I got rid of the big screen. I just went to the little pictures. It's not doing it on the little ones. So I don't know what that was about.
Thanks, Sam, for the help getting me in. This is Tammy.
Hey, Tammy.
Samantha, this is Joe Knight. Are we going to be raising our hands tonight?
Yes, I believe Chair Smile will ask you to raise your hand when you would want to speak, and then we will do motions through the chat.
Okay. Can you remind me how to raise my hand again?
Oh, are you on your iPad?
Yes, I am.
So you have a menu at the bottom of your iPad screen when you tap it, and I think it's the little person with the 3 lines. If you hit that, you might go ahead or raise hand.
When I do that, I get all the attendees.
Yeah.
So then
Tonight, it just has the chat and no hand down there.
correct.
Earlier, when I logged in, there was a hand and a chat, and now there's just the chat.
Tammy's hand is raised. Tammy, are you on your iPad?
Yes, my hand is raised.
Can you remind me, do you hit the ellipses, the 3 dots, or the person with the lines through
The
it?
person with the smiley face and a plus sign, and it's the first icon. It's a raised hand.
It's like a picture of a hand, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And you hit it once, and it raises the hand, and it's a dark blue.
Okay, I see that little smiley face person wasn't there before. It was all in the person with the 3 lines. So I see it now. Thanks.
Okay.
Joe, do you got it?
Yeah, it
I
looks
think
like,
so. Is my hand raised now?
looks like it did an up.
Yep, your hand is
A
up.
little bit different.
Okay. No, I'll take
So
that.
Sam, I took mine down, right? This is
I love that
Tammy.
everybody's trying this.
That's a good idea.
Be a bunch of little hands.
Because we're using it tonight. So,
Hey, Chair Smire.
hi.
So for a motion, do we send it to host or do we click on your name and send it?
You're asking me, my name, host, yes.
You could go in the host box there. Okay.
Yeah, yep.
Hey, Connie,
Thanks.
how late did you work at the polls today?
I was a 7 to 3 person, so I hear you came in a little bit later.
I started at 10. That
Yeah.
snow sucked. You got out when the getting was pretty much just starting.
I know. No, it was going before that. Plus, were you in a tent?
Yes.
We had to keep hitting the roof of the tent to get it accumulates water
Yeah,
and it leaks on everything.
They assigned a guy to get a snow rake, and they were raking it all off.
Oh,
Hi, this is
exciting.
Kathy by phone. Am I live?
You are live.
Yes.
It must be. We can hear you.
Chair Smire, I believe Supervisor Anton will also be joining via the phone.
Okay.
Samantha, came in the middle of your raising the hand. Would you kind of briefly hit that again?
Sure. If you tap your screen, there's a menu at the bottom that will pop up.
Yes.
And you'll hit the person. There's a little person with 3 lines.
Yes.
Click on that, and there's a little icon that has a hand up.
All the
Actu-
way to the left.
Actually, tonight, Samantha, on my screen, the person with the 3 lines only has the chat. To the right of it is like a smiley face.
Yeah,
They
the
must have
smiley
changed
face.
it.
And it's the smiley face icon that has the hand in it now.
Yeah.
Right, but it doesn't. Okay, so is my hand up now?
Yes.
And is that what we're supposed to do if we want to move a motion or something?
If you want to speak, that's what you should do. If you want a motion, you will use your chat. And if you just open the
Okay.
chat bubble, and you'll be able to talk to me.
Okay.
Thanks for not giving up on us with all the chat.
That's true.
We'll all learn. We'll all learn.
Samantha, Joe Knight again. When I want to chat, should a little keyboard pop up there? Let's see.
I think so, yeah. On your iPad?
Do I want a private chat with you?
Yes. That's the only thing it'll allow you to do.
Okay. Okay. I think I see it now. Okay.
You can test it if you want.
I'm a slow typer. Well, on one of these things at least.
They make keyboards for him.
Samantha will be the only one that sees your embarrassing mistakes, Joe.
Okay.
He asked me, is it working? It is working.
Okay. I forgot the question mark. Bad punctuation.
Give it to the writer.
The things gone through or
For all users that are calling in, please mute your personal devices.
And Jim Dunning, put your hand down.
Thank you. And you too, Supervisor Mowry. Thank you.
He's waving.
Yes. Notice.
Thank you for the description.
Samantha?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Gary. Say, Anton just called me, and he said his internet is down right now.
Yep.
And he said it's been down since yesterday. Well,
Yep.
mine was too until about 9 o'clock last night. So I told him to reboot his router and try it again. So he's going to try it. So
Great. Dave Hayden is working with him as well, so we'll make sure he gets in either way.
Okay.
Supervisors, it is now 7 o'clock. I call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors on this Tuesday, October the 20th. Sorry. Next item is the honoring of the flag and moment of reflection by Supervisor Schneider. The supervisors, please unmute, and together, hopefully together, we'll say the. And thank you, Supervisor Bates, for the picture.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag.
United States of America, and to the republic
For
which it stands,
And
one nation,
nation,
indivisible,
God,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Apologies, I forgot God there. So, Supervisor Schneider.
Thank you. When an esteemed former colleague like Greg Moore sends us an email about civility, I figured it was time to pay some attention to it. I did a little research. There's a lot out there about how civility is more than gritted teeth politeness. The inner tendency to self-absorption, callousness, and manipulation have always been there for all of us. Nowadays, our country's dividedness, our fears and concerns about the economy, the pandemic, and on, the lack of face-to-face discourse, I think have helped to increase tendencies toward incivility. From George Washington to Mr. Rogers, a lot has been written about civility. I like Fred Rogers. I can understand him. He answers the question with, what do you do with the mood, with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? He says, in times of stress, the best thing we can do for each other is to listen with our ears and our hearts and be assured that our questions are just as important as our answers. What really matters is helping others win too, even if it means slowing down and changing our course now and then. I pulled out that Speak Your Piece 9 tools for civility that we used last January before pandemic, and I challenge myself and possibly you after each meeting to grade yourself. Did you pay attention, listen, be inclusive, refrain from gossip and listening to it, show respect, look for opportunities to agree, apologize, give constructive criticism, not personal attack, and take responsibility for what you say? As Mr. Rogers says, there is something of yourself that you leave at every meeting with another person. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is the roll call. Clerk Loomis, are you on?
Yes, I am. Supervisor Gibson,
Present.
McKinney,
Present.
Knight,
Here.
Pagonis,
Here.
Anton. I'm going to consider him on because somebody is working with him. Zook,
Here.
Chilson, Stelgis,
Here.
Maury, Coffee,
Here.
Henning, Bates,
Here.
Russell,
Here.
Gatlin,
Present.
Smyer,
Here.
Handbook Boyle,
Here.
Neiman,
Here.
Dunning,
Here.
Wilkie,
Here.
Anderson,
Present.
Beckfield,
Here.
Schneider,
Here.
Leary,
Here.
DeLuca,
Here.
Jansen,
Here.
Schroffnagel,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
Kronk,
Here.
Christofferson.
Present.
I am showing just one absent, Chilson, so if that is incorrect, if Ms. Supervisor Chilson could speak right now?
He was lit up here on the screen.
He was,
earlier.
huh?
Yeah.
Well, I will consider him on then. There's 29 present, thank you.
We have a quorum. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is approval of the Journal of Proceedings from October the 6th. A motion, please. Send it by chat. Samantha?
I'm just waiting.
Okay.
We got motion by Supervisor Anderson and second by Maury.
Thank you. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the Journal of Proceedings? I see no hands raised. Supervisors, please unmute for a moment. All those in favor of approval of the Journal of Proceedings, indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed by nay. Thank you. It is unanimous. There was background noise from someone. Would you check? Would you mute, please?
It is coming from County Clerk Loomis.
From what? Sorry?
Janet, it's coming from Janet.
As soon as I say the names, I'll go off. I'm not anything, I'm just sitting here still, but some reason I have an issue, so. If you're ready for public comment, I'll say the name and then I'll unmute, or mute, I mean.
Okay, before we do that, I would like to make a couple comments about public comment. As you know, by our county code, our public comment period is 30 minutes, 3 minutes per speaker. And this is a reminder to those who will be speaking tonight. This is not a public hearing and it is not a public debate. It is a public comment. The second comment I have is that in order to keep us moving along, we are going to ask Samantha to give a 30-second warning. And then at the 3-minute point, that person will be cut off, will be, I can't think of any other word for it. That person will be cut off. Samantha, wasn't there a third point?
So just to clarify, Janet will be timing and I will be cutting off at the 3 minutes.
Okay.
No, I think you got it.
I'm sure that you all been receiving large numbers of email about one of our agenda items. And so I've had to organize the public comment in order to give due process to the various persons. So we're going to have the first public comment from a person commenting on the resolution regarding the airport resolution. So Samantha, would you begin?
Patty Durkop?
I'm here.
Go ahead.
So, thank you. I would like to just start out with saying that I listened to what the woman was talking about as far as, you know, communication and listening and thinking about others. And so I think that is a perfect segue into what I have to say as someone that lives across the neighborhood, or across the street, I mean, from the airport. I'm in the 3200 block of Mars Avenue. And I am asking for a postponement of the resolution number 201 or 20-21/082. And I am very concerned about how the CARES Act money is going to be used to build a massive hangar complex on the south side of the airport. It would be more appropriate on the north end, as it would have less impact on other residents that live over here on the south side. The north end is buffered more by trees. There is less houses impacted, and due to the winds usually coming out of the northwest, with the hangars and the air traffic already present, not only is the noise at times loud from the smaller planes, but it is the air quality. So when we have a north-northwest wind, the smell of fuel can be overwhelming, especially on foggy, balmy days. And even this morning when I was outside with the dogs, I could literally taste it on my lips because it hangs in the air. I was on my patio with some friends the other night and we had to come inside. It was that bad. And then plus on the weekends, we have the National Guard out and they leave their trucks idling. So you're also adding diesel fuel to all of that. I've lived here since 2011 and my first year that we went through a drought summer with no rain, I was noticing that my bare feet and on my shoes was black. And I couldn't figure that out because dirt isn't black, because it's all sand over here. And I realized that it was jet fuel that had lingered and is laying everywhere. It's on the grass, it's on our siding, it makes a mess on everything. My clothes when I want to hang them.
30 seconds.
Okay. I'm really sad with the noise the traffic already that we have, and then to think that you're going to bring in a commercial jet line. I just feel that you should allow the north side people over here by the airport a chance to speak. This does impact our lives and it impacts our health. And I would really like to be able to have more of this information go out so everyone has a chance to say what they want to do with their tax dollars and with this COVID money. We're all impacted by it.
3 minutes.
Thank you. Clerk Lewis, we have, I think, 4 names coming up.
Yep. The
But,
next speak. Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to say that you probably are aware that we have a group that organized a letter, not really a petition, but a letter with 1,300 names on it. So in order to cover as much of that as we can, I've invited 4 persons to speak to that, to the health ordinance from that group. And Clerk Loomis will call the names.
Rebecca Zimmerman.
Thank you. This condensed public comment represents the voices of 1,320 Eau Claire citizens. This ordinance could create constitutional doubt. There is not an exception to constitutional rights in a pandemic or public health crisis. We have heard the attorneys comparing the power of this ordinance to powers entrusted to other unelected officials such as police officers. Police officers may not be elected, but they do take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that is a huge difference. We already have a process for enforcement that can be used if needed. This ordinance will be used to enforce expectations for the current virus, which is based on changing criteria and goals which are unreasonable and unjustified. Although cases are rising as expected for any virus, voluntary compliance with mitigation measures remain high. The ordinance seeks 100% compliance through means of threat. The hospitalization rate and death rate remain statistically low in spite of a rise in cases. The probability of being hospitalized with a positive case is still only at 3.6%. While it is true hospitals are at a higher capacity, hospitals are now performing elective procedures that were previously put off. Locally, we are at 73% capacity, which is actually below normal, and even below the optimal rate hospitals desire to be at of 85%. Saying that hospitals are full simply because of COVID is misleading. This ordinance could continue to cause unintended consequences to children. The CDC states that children are not at a high risk, yet children are not able to attend school 5 days in Eau Claire. The situation we are facing with education and mental health in school-age children due to our COVID response is the actual crisis here. We cannot continue using COVID deaths as the only benchmark of our success or failure. This ordinance will only make it more difficult to return to a normal school model. This ordinance will continue to cause unintended consequences to small business owners. Small business owning families have worked diligently to follow the current orders and have intrinsic motivation to protect customers and employees. Passing this ordinance will disincentivize businesses, causing business owners to seek other counties to operate in. With the current requirement to operate at a reduced capacity, many are already struggling to pay bills and employees. Currently, the health department does not inspect all businesses or have the ability to fine or close them. This ordinance, if passed, would put the power to cite and close any business in the hands of one department based on their general orders. We keep hearing these citations that are no different than a fine for failing to stop at a stop sign. The alarming use of this simple analogy comparing a stop sign to enforceable health orders clearly shows that the unintended consequences and side
30
effects of
seconds.
mental health, failing economy, and socioeconomic challenges have not even been considered by those supporting this ordinance. We need you as elected officials to understand the complex viewpoints of personal health choices and stop downplaying them with comparisons to stop signs and fire alarms. This ordinance removes the ability for individuals to make the health choices that suit their family best, and we already are compliant. Legislation should not be passed on or be based on emotion. We are asked to trust the local health officer as justification for this ordinance. Legislation passed into law ought not be based on the character of the person currently in the position. If this is passed, it is unlikely to be retracted and applies to any person that holds this unelected position in the future. The fact that this ordinance would allow for a penalty to pass into local legislation without a specific violation attached to it should be concerning to you as public servants who are sworn to uphold the constitutional rights of your neighbors. Please listen to those you represent. This ordinance is not necessary. Please vote tonight and vote no.
Jason Gonzalez.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Jason Gonzalez, 1610 Fairway Street. I'm from Eau Claire and have enjoyed living here. It's hard to hear people talk about leaving or not wanting to do business here due to this ordinance. I oppose this ordinance and I've never voted for a Republican in my life. My beliefs do not stem from leadership at the federal level. Free speech has been compromised and many are afraid to express how they feel. There is an illusion of consensus among healthcare workers for COVID protocols. We've already had multiple nurses speaking at these meetings, but hesitant to share their credentials. So far in attempting to share alternate perspectives, we've been labeled as spamming and spreading misinformation. Let people decide for themselves. Local officials and the CDC are not our parents. Having a stance against enforceable orders is not an implication the virus is not real or the disacknowledgement of mortality and other effects of it. I am aware the virus is real and there isn't a perfect solution to this. Lives are also being affected by the health orders as well. In Eau Claire, we have a 99.6 survival rate with this virus, yet we're turning everything upside down, treating this like the Spanish flu, not considering the side effects of measures being used to stop it. There is other science, and many citizens are considerate of other experts, evaluating both sides and making choices about how they want to live, which you are supposed to represent as elected officials. Alternatives to enforceable orders include maintaining some of the current orders as recommendations and placing an emphasis on directing mitigation efforts towards environments with high concentrations of high-risk individuals. Sweden has 10 million people, a 2.6 million metro area, and has not used highly restrictive measures. Initially, results were poor as they failed to protect vulnerable populations, and half the mortality was in nursing homes. Recently, they have averaged less than 2 deaths per day over the past 2.5 months. The way Statute 252 has been applied is not justified. We don't need enforcement on healthy people interacting with low-risk healthy people. I don't want to live in a community with only McDonald's or Walmart to choose from. I don't want to hear my daughter tell me she has to wait for the teacher to look the other way to hold hands with her friends. You don't have to be an expert to unmask multidimensional negative effects of ongoing generalized health orders and a disproportionate response. We've already had high compliance with existing orders. Too much division in the community will be caused by passing this ordinance. Please vote no, and thank you for your time.
Amber Richards.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'd ask you to just remember to please take the opinions of the multiple people who contacted you into consideration when making your vote and not your own emotions. No ordinance is needed. Do not table this, just say no. Leave this in the power of the people. Business owners can require masks and other things to people, and they can choose not to shop there. Please don't threaten fines to regulate where people can go and who businesses and establishments can allow as patrons. Give people their free will and assess their own risk and take responsibility for their own health. I can make daily decisions of where I will go and which places to patronize based on their rules and regulations, but I cannot easily sell my home, quit my job, uproot my family, and leave the entire community if this oppressive ordinance is passed. These things are wrong with the ordinance. It gives power to an elected official. It has wording and ambiguity. It leads to unconstitutional results. It negatively affects businesses. And something I'd like to talk about is it's putting us into an experiment that we did not sign up for. We are being mandated and will be forced to have fines if we don't wear masks. It's been alluded to already. It would put us into a situation where we will not know the adverse effects of this masking that we've already been doing. As a person who has worked with children for 22 years and holds a master's degree in educational psychology, I'm extremely concerned for children wearing masks. They shut down emotionally. They have various communication barriers. And also for children being cared for by individuals in masks for upwards of 10 hours a day in a daycare setting. It blocks their highly important developmental processes that involve reading facial expressions. The need for medical intervention and vaccines as the only means to get to the other side of this virus is a very one-sided and Western medicine type approach to health and wellness. I am not discounting these methods. I'm simply stating that forcing these methods onto an entire population is wrong and is against our individual rights to approach health in the way that one might see best for themselves. It is pushing the local legislators as you to understand that the health department's job is to educate, not to dictate. The health department's job is to reinforce health and safety measures, not to enforce fines and penalties, to limit one's ability to make a living and pay bills, to withhold education, to close down places of worship, and mandate treatment protocols. In closing, I will just ask when this will ever end. When we talked in the chamber Q&A, it was said that there was needed to be less than 10 positive cases per day. This is never going to happen when huge amounts of people are getting tests mandatorily. Excuse me. Not to mention that these people might have no symptoms whatsoever and are not even good carriers of the virus. A significant portion of the population, if they do receive a vaccine, which is unlikely to achieve because most people don't want to take a brand new vaccine. So these are unattainable goals to get back to a lifestyle of liberty and freedom. Thank you for listening.
Clerk Loomis? Clerk Loomis? I think you may have passed over a name. Would you unmute, please? Can you unmute, Janet? You're still muted. Sorry.
Not coming through clearly.
Chair Meyer, I think I can clarify that. We had checked with the group, and the names submitted were a little bit different than what you had.
Okay, fine. That's fine.
So she's correct.
Okay. Who is the next speaker, please? Go ahead.
You're unmuted, Chair
I'm
Loomis.
sorry. I'm sorry. I was disconnected for a little while. Josh Andrew?
Good evening. I'm the Reverend Joshua Andrew, and I would like to begin by applauding the intentions of this board to protect our community in attempting to ameliorate the suffering of the COVID-19 pandemic. We do appreciate your willingness to serve our county. However, I would respectfully suggest that the current proposed health ordinance is not the best way for the board to accomplish this goal for our community. If you read the paper that my wife and I submitted, you will understand that much of our community is suffering from pandemic fatigue and defiant attitudes that result not from malice, but from frustration due to their own losses, misinformation, or a growing lack of trust in health leadership. If you at all appreciate Bandura's social cognitive theory and the psychology of human agency, then you would realize that passing an ordinance aimed at punitively enforcing general orders will only exacerbate noncompliance in this context, an opinion which is supported by the World Health Organization Europe's recent public health publication. Passing this ordinance will cause further division in this county and perhaps lead to greater unrest and civil disobedience, the exact opposite of what you hope to achieve. While it may be counterintuitive for you, if you want to increase compliance with current and future orders, you must reject the proposed ordinance and focus instead on alternative strategies that foster community consensus and reinvigorate cooperative social action. At some point, the paradigm of this board and others must shift from trying to tell people what to do to listening to the community and asking what we can do together to accomplish our mutual goals. After all, I believe there are few, if any, people who are intentionally trying to hurt others in their response to COVID. Let's respect one another's needs and work together using a strategy as old as Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. You will discover that cooperation works better than threats. I would ask the board not to ignore half a century of proven social behavioral science. I would ask you to step back from this decision and allow your intellect to legislate instead of your well-intended passion. Please vote against any ordinance that seeks to establish a mechanism of general order enforcement and consider more appropriate strategies of educating for prevention, preparedness, and cooperation that are scientifically more effective and reasonably serve the best interests of this community. Thank you, and may God grant you wisdom as you weigh this contentious issue. Have a pleasant evening.
Clerk Loomis, I believe the next four speakers are persons speaking in favor of the ordinance.
Elizabeth Ivanovic, maybe?
Yes, Elizabeth Ivankovic, 5001 William Court. First, I'd like to thank you and the Public Health Department for all your hard work. I am in favor of this ordinance. I feel it needs to be passed as soon as possible. Across this country, there is a loud voice insisting that personal responsibility will get us through this crisis. But after 8 months, that way just isn't working. Rates are rising in Eau Claire. This COVID virus could care less about politics, task forces, the business of the county budget process, or the city council vote. It just wants to replicate and will continue to do so until we get serious. The governor's mask mandate expires on November 21st unless politics interferes with that. A January decision is far too late. We need this passed by the middle of November. Like so many other issues, there comes a time when the county board must act. This is that time. Over the past 160 years, Eau Claire County has passed ordinances for the good of our community. From ordinances about loose cows to zoning, dog licenses to building inspectors, requiring landfill permits and restaurant inspections. We have these laws and ordinances because what we do affects our neighbors. Our actions affect our air, water, property values, and health. We pay for county professionals because we know rules and zoning protect our investments and our lives. What we do impacts. Bringing COVID numbers down will help businesses and schools stay open. Business owners are coming to work learning their staff has COVID and having to cancel business while these employees are out. That is happening right now, and it is only going to get worse as COVID increases. We must give our public health department the tools they need to ensure our community remains healthy and businesses open. I wrote to each of you with a story about my son taking a class through the Eau Claire School District at our local Goodwill store. As I waited in the parking lot to pick him up, I heard a mother say to her 3 children who were each ready to don their masks and go into the building, she said, "Don't put them on unless they force you to." The irony that she spoke those words under the Goodwill sign was not lost on me, a store built to support community. That mother verbalized what many are doing, walking into stores and businesses without a mask.
30 seconds.
Without a care for who may be inside a door. Their inconvenience of wearing a mask more important than the health and well-being of our community. We have since pulled our child from that program. We need to work on teaching love of community, love of other over ourselves, and what personal responsibility actually means, but we don't have time. Why do we need this public health ordinance? Because we've become a community that doesn't look to do the acts of goodwill anymore, even when it's spelled out on a sign right above our heads. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Wolfgram.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, County Board Chairperson Smyer and County Board Supervisors. I am in favor of the communicable disease ordinance. However, we now have a very confusing set of circumstances with our city pausing and the county hearing public comment and then voting on the ordinance. We do have a shared governance committee. How did we get to this point, which may result in a disjointed mixed message to our community in an already mixed messaging state and federal environment? Unintended consequences from not being able to enforce an order results in rendering public health mute. Public health cannot be negotiated. For those who believe that we have a contentious difference of opinion and just need a pause, when nearly all of our metrics are in the emergency zone and we are entering the highest risk season, my perspective is this. This is not a difference of opinion, and we need no additional data. Apart from the economic argument and pandemic fatigue that we're all experiencing, this is a worldview difference. Big data analytics has written about how America's individualism has complicated the pandemic response. Worldviews are deeply embedded within us, and they define what we value. They are resistant to change. They overall do not respond to evidence or persuasion. This clash of worldviews is between the "don't tread on me" believers. The other is "I am my brother's keeper." While many like to believe and hope that we can do this together and pause the emergency order to get together and construct an ordinance palatable to most in our community, our house is burning. When the house is burning, you grab the kids and the dog and you get out. You don't discuss what other belongings you'd like to take with you. You can put that on pause. Whatever your vote, I urge you to exercise your shared governance committee and sit down with our public health director and city council representatives to work out a shared response and plan in the best interest of our community's public health. Thank you so much, and thank you for your service.
Kate Wilson.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the board hearing comments tonight. My name is Kate Wilson, and I live at 602 East MacArthur Avenue in Eau Claire. I've been a resident for 12 years. I'm here to support the local health order ordinance. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it's become very clear to me why public health orders are important and necessary when we're dealing with contagious diseases and the health of an entire community. I think that health officers serve an important role in our community and that health orders are an appropriate and reasonable part of that role. They can make evidence-informed decisions and put them into effect quickly, which I think is really important. They have to act nimbly. As we have seen, viruses can change and we need things when we need them. They're trained to do these kinds of things, whereas we citizens are just learning as we go. And so I see the value in being able to respond quickly with the most up-to-date information that they have by trained public health professionals. So before the state health order went into effect, I found it was difficult for our family to do the needed daily tasks like going to the grocery store without worrying about safety and the possibility of contracting COVID-19. It was difficult to try to balance that need for groceries before businesses adopted masking requirements with the need to protect my family from COVID-19. So once the health order went into effect, it made it much easier for us to do our daily business because we knew that others were going to be doing what they could to protect us from COVID, masking and distancing in this case. So I believe local health orders can serve a similar purpose in ensuring the health of families and our entire communities. And I know this isn't about COVID-19, but I think this is just one example of how it can be helpful. And I'm very confident that the order has sufficient legislative oversight. I think that is really important. And if something were not right, the legislative body could come back and change that. Those are all my comments. I thank you very much for considering this issue and for serving our county.
Thank you.
Mary Conte. Mary Conte, K-A-N-T-E. If she is not on, then the next one is David Miner.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. Again, thank you for allowing us to speak to you this evening. My name is David Miner. I'm the president and CEO for the Eau Claire Area Chamber of Commerce. We agree that the COVID-19 is a serious health issue and we all need to be doing our part. The Chamber has actively participated in the Chippewa Valley Economic Recovery Task Force from the beginning. In fact, we have had 3 staff members working on that task force from the start. One of those individuals has been recognized several times for being the glue that has held it together. We have worked with our investor businesses and organizations to help them implement best practices to actively respond to and slow the spread, including wearing face masks, which again, to remind everyone, we did run a separate marketing campaign to encourage folks to do that, as well as physical distancing and good hygiene. I say all of that so you clearly understand that we have been and will continue to be an integral partner throughout all of this. Unfortunately, unlike those cooperative efforts, the proposed city and county ordinances were drafted and introduced without input, notice, or consensus from key stakeholders, including the business community, education, and healthcare. Once the Chamber learned of the introduction of this ordinance, we carefully considered how we should respond. Therefore, we developed a 4-point approach. We surveyed our members, We held a town hall meeting with both city and county officials. We sought both local and state legal opinions, and our Government Affairs Committee held a special meeting that weighed the pros and cons of the issue and made their recommendation to the Chamber Board. The Chamber Board held a special meeting on October 5th and voted unanimously to request the ordinances be withdrawn and taken back to the drawing board. Our Government Affairs Director has provided our full statement to each of the members of the County Board, which fully explains our reasoning. As you know, the Eau Claire City Council last week voted to postpone consideration to provide time to develop a community engagement plan to carefully consider the path forward. Since moving here 3 years ago, I have been very impressed with the high level of collaboration that exists in our community. So tonight, the Chamber strongly encourages the County Board to likewise take a pause on this proposal and join the City Council in bringing stakeholders and partners together to consider all perspectives and have that strong level of collaboration on this issue. Thank you very much for listening to our speak tonight.
Nikki Judkins?
Is that our 10th speaker? Yes.
Oh, we've got 1 minute left. Do you want to start another one or not?
Well, have we reached 10 speakers?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No.
Okay. Then
Mickey Judkins would be number 10. Mickey Judkins?
Apparently we should go on.
Kyle Yodes? Kyle, Y-O-D-E-S. Alicia Stevens. Tanya Matthews. Lynn Denke.
Yes, I am here, and I will not take a full screen. Can you hear me?
Who's speaking, please?
Lynn Danke, she just
Thank
called
you.
my name, and
Thank
my
you.
comment won't take the full 3 minutes. I've lived in Eau Claire since 1990. I stand with the Eau Claire Chamber of Commerce in opposition to the public health order. I stand with many Eau Claire citizens who would like our public health officer to resign. I stand with the more than 1,300 who want you to vote no. We are constantly being told to accept the best science, and yet there has been no recognition that the CDC said the death rate is only 6% of the overall number due to comorbidity deaths of people who've died with COVID rather than from COVID. There has been no recognition of the WHO stating that the lockdowns are doing more harm than good. There has been no recognition of the CDC stating back in July that roughly 70% of those coming down with COVID always or almost always wore masks, and just under 4% of those coming down with COVID rarely or never wore a mask. Please vote no on 20-21/073. There are too many questions, too many of your constituents who are opposed to this order, too many unclear motives, too much division in our community, too many changes coming from the CDC and the WHO to make decisions based on old information instead of the new information that has been coming out since July to move forward with this public health ordinance. Please do the right thing and pull this ordinance 20-21/073 off the table and vote no, and begin to make decisions on the real numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. That is our last speaker, I believe.
Chair Smyer, I just wanted to mention there are over 100 written comments that have been received. They have been sent to the Board of Supervisors, and their names will be noted in the minutes.
Thank you. And I also want to thank the speakers this evening and all those who have submitted comment for this period, as well as all those who sent emails to all the members of the county board. I think we have a lot of feedback. So again, we thank you all for taking part. Now request that all those who are online by telephone to mute your devices so that we may go on with our meeting. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is reports to the county board under 2.04.320, beginning with the 2020 NWS Weather Ready Nation Ambassador of Excellence Award. Who's speaking to this?
Good evening. This is Dan Luna. I'm the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service in Chanhassen. I hope you all can hear me at the county board. Can you?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. The purpose of what I want to say tonight is to acknowledge the County of Eau Claire, and specifically Tyler and Sam. They have done a stellar job promoting weather preparedness. In the National Weather Service, we realize we can't do this by ourselves. We're only 20-some people in my office. We cover a large part of Minnesota and western Wisconsin, and we're working 24 hours a day. So we just don't have that many extra people. So we know we need businesses, we need counties, we need cities, and we need other organizations that help people to promote weather preparedness. And that's exactly what the Eau Claire County Emergency Management folks have done. I've been here for 19 years. I have seen a lot of what happens in western Wisconsin as well as Minnesota. And I can tell you, Tyler and Sam have put you guys in a position that I have never seen in a county in western Minnesota. It is impressive. So our award goes to the county, well, it actually can go to any one of the 12,000 ambassadors we have in the United States, 12,000. We can only pick one. We have about 400 ambassadors in our area. We have the second most ambassadors in the United States. So we decide out of all 400, who will we pick? And Tyler and Sam took it to a level that we just couldn't look past. They have done a fantastic job promoting weather safety through media and outreach events, including Music in the Park and the National Night Out. They've provided presentations to businesses and civic groups, and they have done an excellent job promoting weather preparedness across social media platforms. And when I say weather preparedness, I'm talking about don't drive through roads that are covered with water, nowhere to go when there's a tornado warning. Don't be outside when there's a thunderstorm around. These are all the things that kill people. I can tell you that of all the fatalities we have in the United States due to flash floods, all of those are preventable, not 95%. All of them are. Most of those fatalities are because people drove through flooded roads and the road wasn't there and the car got washed away and we were not able to save it. So out of the 12,000, they are in rare company to receive this award. And I just wanted to say a few words to show our appreciation for that, because that's really what we need. We need other people to help us make our country more prepared. So thank you for your time, and thank you, Tyler, and thank you, Sam.
Supervisors, please unmute and let us show our appreciation for Tyler and Tyler and Sam, excuse me. Thank you, supervisors. Next on our agenda is 2011B advanced refunding bills. Sean, are you online? Sean?
Sorry.
You're muted.
Yes,
Oh,
Mr. Chairman. Yep, I am here. Thank you. Good evening, supervisors. I'm going to share my screen, I believe, for a handout that I'm going to briefly go over with you all. So bear with me 1 second. Okay. If this is not clear for anyone, please let me know.
It seems to be clear, Sean. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Supervisors may recall that at the last meeting I participated in, we talked about doing a refunding of the 2011B bond issue. Interest rates are at a very low point, and the call date for that issue is not until September of next year, of 2021. So we explored some options with the Finance Committee to lock into interest rates now in advance of that prepayment refinancing date of September of next year. And we got a few proposals from banks, large, and we offered it to those in the area as well that might be interested in this issue. The best proposal we received was from Morgan Stanley, and that brings me to the chart that you see before you. The initial proposal that we received back at the end of September and early October showed savings, and hopefully you can see where I'm pointing here, of about 1.9 million over the next 10 years. And after reviewing that proposal and other proposals, discussing it with NORB, the decision was made to proceed with discussions with Morgan Stanley to finalize the transaction, or hopefully finalize the transaction. We have been working on that, county staff, the county's bond attorney, Quarles and Brady, and myself, working with Morgan Stanley and their representatives. The current interest rate since the beginning of October until now has increased slightly, such that the updated numbers for savings on refinancing the 2011 issue that Morgan Stanley provided us today yield this, or 1.873 million future value, 1,723,000 present value at this point. We have, I would say, and if Norb would agree, I think we're very close to a finalization. And since the county had a board meeting tonight, what we talked with Quarles and Brady about preparing for you this evening is what is called a parameters resolution. And we discussed this with the Finance Committee before this meeting earlier this evening. The parameters resolution authorizes county staff to approve a final term sheet or bond purchase agreement with Morgan Stanley as long as minimum results are achieved. And what we had recommended tying to that was minimum savings. Now, as I mentioned, these are what we discussed with Morgan Stanley today as the current market to refinance that 2011 issue. And again, these are net of all costs associated with it. So $1,873,000 in future value savings, $1,723,000 in present value savings. For the committee and also for the full board this evening, I did show a couple sensitivity analyses in which the yields would go up 10 basis points, 15, 20, or 25. And as those yields would increase, the savings then could and would decrease on refinancing. There still would be solid savings, but if yields were to go up, the savings would go down. So as we discussed with the committee, a minimum savings amount to put into the parameters resolution this evening, the number settled on was a present value savings of $1.5 million or 1,500,000 in between these two that I'm highlighting on the handout on the sheet. So what would be needed by the board this evening to continue and authorize staff to finalize terms with Morgan Stanley likely between now and your next meeting, hopefully yet this week, that's the plan, is approval of this resolution setting a floor on the savings of $1.5 million, but with the expectation that assuming we can get the finalization of this agreement in the next couple of days, we would expect to be far closer to the savings that you'll see here that were provided today in our discussions with Morgan Stanley. So again, what would be needed of the board this evening is approving that parameters resolution, which would set that floor of savings that would allow Norb and other county staff to proceed at $1.5 million. He would then have the authorization, as long as the savings were greater than that, to approve it. County staff wouldn't have to do that, but they would be allowed to do that per the decision of the county board this evening. So, Chairman, I'll stop there, and maybe if Norb has anything to add, or Stella from the committee, if I'm not speaking out of line here in terms of how the meeting should move forward. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Sean. And Sean, you will remain with us until we consider the motion, correct?
I can, Mr. Chairman, yes.
I think that would be good. I'm scanning the board members, and I see no hands raised, Sean.
Schneider with a question.
Oh, sorry. We have our one phone supervisor. Supervisor Schneider, please go forward.
And maybe this is not the appropriate time, but I am wondering if Norb is in favor of this.
If I can answer that, Chair Smeyer?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we're at relatively historic low interest rates, and you could see from what Sean presented that even between October 1st and October 20th, there's been a slight uptick. So I think the time is right, and we've kind of used the analogy of bird in the hand, if you will. And so, yes, I'm definitely in favor of it.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Supervisor Pagonis. This passed Finance Committee unanimously, and we've been talking about this for several months. So we are somewhat enthusiastic at the potential of saving $1.5 million in interest.
Thank you for your comment. We're going to move on to the next item, the proposed local health ordinance report, Corp Counsel Sullivan. Are you there?
I'm here. I always have a hard time finding that unmute button. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the proposed ordinance tonight. I know that there was a PowerPoint that was created by Administrator Schaaf, and I'm assuming you're going to put that up for me?
Yes.
Corp Counsel Sullivan, I think there may be a problem with your volume. Could you turn your volume down a little bit?
I don't know how to turn it.
I was afraid of that.
Oh, here. Okay, I can do that.
A little bit. We got an echo from you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, the room I'm in has an echo in it.
Okay.
Before I get into the PowerPoint, one of the questions that has been coming up over the last week is what is the effect of the city not passing the ordinance? This ordinance was created in conjunction with the city, my office and the city attorney's office, along with the administration for both the city and the county, and the health department director, Lisa Giese, all worked on the creation of this. Ordinances were fairly identical in the substantive portions of the ordinances, and were created at the same time because the health department is a city-county health department. And so we wanted to create ordinances that were both in effect at the city and county at the same time. We have to understand a little bit about ordinance and the impact of the city not moving forward at this time. The ordinance, contrary to many of the things that we've heard about it, is not an order. It does not require people to wear masks. It does not require people to shut their businesses. What it does is it establishes parameters upon the health officer in the orders that she issues. Right now, the health officer has authority to issue orders under Wisconsin Statutes 252-03. She's been doing that for some period of time. Those orders could continue even if we don't pass an ordinance tonight, or if sometime in the future it's not passed. What we're doing tonight, though, is asking the court to consider this ordinance, which puts parameters on how those orders are issued. And also, you need to understand that what it does is it creates authority for the board to review those orders. If they are questionable and the board wants to consider them, they can take them in, review them, and potentially make them an advisory order as opposed to an order effective enforceable by the health department. So knowing that, and knowing that that's the intent of this ordinance, is to create that parameters and guide frame for the health officer orders. When you look at that and you consider that everybody in Eau Claire County, even in the municipal areas, is represented by a county board supervisor, they would still have the ability, even though the city has not passed their ordinance at this time, to contact the county board supervisor and request a review by the county board to determine whether or not the ordinance should be converted to an advisory or limited in time frame, all of the things that are set forth within the particular ordinance at this time. The one question that does remain about not having the city adopt their ordinance is enforcement. Right now, you have to understand a little bit about home rule. The city has adopted their own health ordinance. They have taken responsibility for enforcing health ordinances within the city of Eau Claire. And if the county passes our ordinance, we would not be able to enforce that within the city of Eau Claire. So citations could be written in the townships. It could be written in those municipalities that have adopted county health ordinance or have requested that the county adopt or enforce the health ordinance within their municipalities. And so that's where we're left at this point as a result of the city not adopting their ordinance. Now, to get to the PowerPoint, why are we presenting this ordinance at this time? Well, first of all, at the present time, there's a lack of guidance at the state and federal level. We know that we do have statutes, Chapter 252. Chapter 252 talks about communicable diseases. It talks about the health officer at the state level, also talks about powers that are given to the health officer at the local level. We also know that chapter, particularly 252.03, gives the local health officer the ability to take whatever action is necessary to stem communicable diseases and can issue orders on a reasonable and necessary standard. That language has not yet been changed. We did have earlier this year the decision in the Supreme Court, Wisconsin Legislature versus Palm. That was directly aimed at the powers of the health officer at the state level. And because of that, and because those powers are similar, the city attorney's office and my office decided to sit down and look at the situation and draft this ordinance consistent with the language of the Palm decision, because the writing is essentially on the wall for local health officers. The Palm decision, when it was going through, had several concerns. One of those concerns was a lack of legislative oversight. There was a lot of discussion on the Palm decision about the fact that Secretary Palm is an unelected official, that she is essentially issuing orders that are punishable by misdemeanors, which means that an individual could eventually be jailed or fined, and that the orders essentially are without parameters with regards to time limits. So the ordinance that we have drafted addresses those issues. It creates parameters. You want to go to the next slide, please. it creates parameters. It outlines the duties of the public health officer in creating orders. It creates procedural safeguards on how the orders are created. Those procedural safeguards are set forth in the ordinance. It also creates substantive safeguards. And then it also does the following. It allows the county board to review orders, approve them, or alter them. It allows the county board to create direct legislation if it doesn't approve of the order or if it chooses to create its own order. That would be, for example, you've seen some of the municipalities in the state of Wisconsin through their councils or boards issue orders, for example, a mask order. That would be an example of direct legislation, as opposed to general legislation, which is setting limits for occupancy, setting limits for most like, occupancy, distance requirements, businesses being open, that sort of thing. This also establishes time limits for orders that would be in effect. Orders would be in effect essentially for 30 days. Within that 30 days, the county board could review it. County board could review them every 30 days for a period of up to 180 days. County board, if it also chooses to do so, could extend that for 90-day time periods up to a period of 1 year. In no instance does an order go into effect for longer than 1 year time period, after which time it would become advisory, or at that time, the county board would have the option of doing direct legislation. And it also creates a forfeiture, a fine for violating orders. And the difference between this and Chapter 252 is this is a fine only. In Chapter 252 right now, the enforcement mechanism calls for a misdemeanor charge, which potentially carries a jail time sentence with it if there is a violation, in addition to a fine. And so that all of these things are consistent with what was discussed in the Palm decision. We're creating legislation at the local level to address those concerns by the Supreme Court. And then if you could switch to the next one, please. And then finally, what does this ordinance not do? It does not give unrestricted or unfettered power to the health officer. And in fact, it does just the opposite. What it does is restrict her current power under 252, which is she can do whatever is reasonable and necessary. This puts parameters on how she has to issue orders within Eau Claire County, and it gives the county board the authority to review those orders, which it currently doesn't have. It requires adherence to the process stipulated in the ordinance. This is not an order. We've heard a lot from the comments tonight that this ordinance is an order. It's going to require people to wear masks, to do certain actions. It doesn't do that. What it does is say any orders issued by the health officer have to comply with the restrictions adopted by this ordinance. It establishes procedures and safeguards for the orders so that there isn't an order that goes into effect for an unlimited period of time without any legislative oversight. And then also, it is not specifically directed at COVID-19. This is a communicable disease ordinance. If you read through the ordinance tonight, there is not anywhere mentioned within the ordinance COVID-19 or coronavirus. It's really aimed at communicable disease in general. It applies not only to what's going on now, but to future instances if we have pandemics again in the future, setting up the parameters about how the health officer issues orders when it's necessary to do so. I wanted to give this short presentation so that you understood why this was drafted and what the goal of the ordinance is. It really is to establish legislative oversight and to take action at a local level that is consistent with the court rulings that have come out of the Supreme Court and some of the other jurisdictions around the state in the last few months. And I guess that's all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we also have comment from, well, I'm going to ask that the supervisors at this point, they're going to ask a question, make it a question of clarification. We will discuss the ordinance when the motion comes up. So if there's any clarification question that you have, please direct it to the Corp Counsel now. I'm looking for raised hands. I see none. I believe we also have Director Lisa Giese online. Director Giese, do you wish to make a clarification or a statement here?
I really am available to answer questions. I think of the ordinance, and certainly I'm willing to answer any questions that county board members have.
Well, I would confine that to questions of clarification. I'm trying to concentrate the discussion into the motion itself. So if it's a clarification question, I'm going to recognize first Supervisor Beckfield, followed by Supervisor Knight. Clarification question.
I guess I can wait till the resolution is discussed, I guess, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Knight.
Yes, this might be more for Council Sullivan, but if I understand correctly, the effect of this ordinance would be to actually restrict the powers of the health officer and make more specific what that person could do.
Correct.
Okay. Supervisor Christopherson. Oh, I'm sorry. The hand was lowered there.
Well, I lowered it because you called on me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
It just took me a second to unmute there.
Okay.
I do just have a question of clarification as to what, if this ordinance was in place versus if it was not in place, what the Department of Health can do with establishments that have multiple reoccurring exposures. Is there anything that can be done now, currently without the ordinance, and would it change if the ordinance was in place?
Again, this is not an ordinance requiring any business to do anything. That would be issued by health officer. And there's a requirement to follow health officer orders. The question is enforceability. The city attorney's office has opined in the city limits that they, because of the Palm decision, not have the ability to enforce their ordinance within the city limits. We do have some discretion because of the regulation that we adopted earlier this year at the county level, but that still may be subject to challenge as to whether or not it's constitutional. And so at this point, you know, there could be an order from the health department to potentially cause this to maybe quarantine if they are a source of outbreak until they clean up. And that's one of those things that's addressed within the ordinance also. But that would be for a temporary basis. But, you know, as far as whether or not they're the source, ongoing, it also involves individuals that are going there. And so that becomes a more difficult issue. And then you get back to the issues of general application, occupancy levels, those sorts of things. So.
Thank you. Supervisor Cronk, followed by Supervisor McKinney.
Thank you. And I just wanted to clarify. So, I think my question was just answered, but if this ordinance does not pass, everything in 252 obviously still applies, and that could mean, I mean, the health officer has full discretion based on, you know, communicable disease outbreaks. If there is a violation, they go to the district attorney, and the what you had said earlier, there can be, you know, either obviously a charge, but also a fine. This limits that to a $200 fine, and that fine sounds like the question of enforcement is what you said becomes tricky with the city not passing the ordinance currently. And if we do, it would be any fines that happen within the county then would come to the county, whereas if individuals were in the city, that fine wouldn't be applicable at this time. Is that correct?
The city has indicated that they don't believe that right now they can enforce based on the Palm decision, based on their ordinance. So, you know, at this point, if we don't adopt an ordinance, the 252 still remains in effect. It's going to be changed by this ordinance at the state level. It's just going to establish parameters at the local level of what our health officer has to do within the county.
And because they're fines, where does that money go to within the county?
Well, they're forfeitures, and so they go to the clerk of court, and like any forfeiture, a portion of it goes to the state and a portion goes to the county.
Supervisor Coffey, followed by Supervisor Bates, followed by Supervisor Russell.
McKinney was next, right?
Yes, no, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm losing it here, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the attorney, Sullivan, help me understand the difference between order and ordinance.
An order is issued by the health officer. That would be occupancy levels, gatherings, limitations to 100 or 250 people. That's the order.
Okay.
The ordinance is county codes. In this instance, what it's saying is that when the health officer issues orders, they have to be issued in this way. They have to follow our procedural safeguards. They have to follow our substantive safeguards, and then they are also subject to review by the county board. Those are the big things of this ordinance.
Okay, and if we pass this ordinance, is this something that could create lawsuits?
Everything can create lawsuits. You know, for me to say yes or no would be me guessing. So.
Okay.
Everything can create a lawsuit.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Coffey, followed by Supervisor Bates, followed by Supervisor Russell. I have that right this time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My confusion comes with partly what Supervisor McKinney asked about orders by our state, Governor Evers and Public Health State, and how they align. It talked about how that aligns in the ordinance, but I wasn't understanding that. So if Governor Evers, for example, has a mandate that we wear masks, is that enforceable at the state level, or who enforces the governor's mandates as far as any kind of monetary fee if it wasn't followed or fine?
So if you look at the orders that are issued, they're actually signed by Secretary Designate Palm when they're issued by the governor. And so, for example, right now we have 25% occupancy order, and there's also a mask order in place. And those are actually signed by the Secretary Designate. She is the state health officer, essentially. And so those are orders issued by her directing the people of the state of Wisconsin to do those two things. They're enforceable by 252, but also and if I remember correctly, and I don't have them in front of me, they also had provisions that they were enforceable by, I think it's the Emergency Management Act is what it is, because declaration of emergency along with those particular orders that are set forth. And that is the state statute, which is the enforcement statute. Who enforces that then is law enforcement for the law enforcement officers for the state of Wisconsin, and they will be prosecuted by the district attorney's office.
Okay, so it said that in our ordinance, if there are orders by Eau Claire City County Health Department, they would be enforced by the City County Health Department. So how does that work? Like, do they bring a police officer with them, or does it? How does that work as far as those fines concerned?
There are members of the health department that have the authority to write citations now.
Okay.
Think about some of the things that the health department does. It does their inspections of restaurants and businesses. Mm-hmm. And if they're in violation, they can get a citation. Do inspections of septic systems, for example. And if you're in violation, you can get a citation. And so some individuals that would also be with the citation authority that would be issuing the citation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Before I recognize the next speaker, I'm going to ask those who've already spoken to lower your hands. Don't confuse the chair here. Please lower your hands. The next speaker is Supervisor Bates, followed by Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a question in regard to the enforcement issue.
Excuse me, Supervisor Bates. Someone has a dog barking in the background.
That's not me.
I didn't think you had a dog.
No.
But I'm just asking whoever that is to mute. Excuse me, Supervisor.
Attorney Sullivan is echoing and it kind of sounds like a dog. So I'm just playing with his mute. So I'll make sure that he's muted and unmuted at the proper time.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Bates, please go ahead.
Thank you. Tim, what I really have a question about is the enforcement issue. My understanding is that under the state statute that the health officer has the ability to do enforcement now. But also I had another question in regard to that statute, that if indeed we do not or fail to enforce the regulations or the guidance that has been given, does not the state statute say that if we don't do it, they will, and we could be billed for that as a county, city, or village?
It does say that they can do it. I'm not sure whether or not we would be billed. I'm not sure about that language.
Well, the language is in the state statute. It's in the 250-04. So I'm assuming that if it really was a situation that we didn't seem to be responding to in an appropriate way, that indeed they could use that measure.
I think that they could. At this point, they're not, though.
Thank you. And so basically, if we were, however, to have our own enforcement here, the likelihood of that happening would be zip.
I can't answer that because that's a question you'd have to ask to the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, thank you.
Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question on the ordinance under 8.30.70 substantive safeguards, B, and I was wondering what the definition is of classification, and if you could give me an example of what classification means or how that might be carried out.
Classifications would be types of businesses. We're going to close bars, but we're not going to close restaurants. Okay, so the thing here is that we want to avoid classifications because that promotes potential lawsuits. We're discriminating against a particular type of business. So if there's going to be a restriction on occupancy, there's going to be a restriction on occupancy. So for example, you see now the state issuing an order for 25% occupancy. And it doesn't say 25% occupancy of just bars or just types of businesses like we had at the stay-at-home order. Now it's just 25% occupancy of public places now. And so that's why we put that in there, to avoid classifications, so that occupancy is directed at the disease. It's not directed at the business.
Okay, but the line does say, I mean, it would be possible if it substantially relates to the mitigation of a threat to public health, et cetera. So it could happen. This does allow for that.
Say that again, please.
Under B, it says that will, to the extent feasible, orders shall be neutral and avoid classifications. But then classification shall only be used when necessary and if necessary. And then only classification substantially relates to the mitigation of a threat to public health based on local conditions, et cetera.
So if you're thinking about communicable disease, and I'm not a health expert, but I'm going to make up an example here. Let's say that you have a restaurant that is having a communicable disease that's coming through a certain type of food or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you may want to have a classification to order that restaurant to stop serving that food or do some sort of mitigation effort to mitigate the spread of that disease. That's what that is going towards.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Wilkie.
Supervisor Anton with a question.
Well, Supervisor Anton, hold on for a moment, please. Supervisor Wilkie is next in line, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you.
Supervisor
Schneider's
Wilkie.
like to be after Anton, too.
No, I just want to
Thank you,
remind you,
Mr. Chairman.
these are clarification questions, not open discussion. I'm sorry, Supervisor Wilkie, go ahead.
That's no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, I'd like to make a statement, and Corp Counsel can tell me if my statement is correct or incorrect or somewhere in between. My understanding, what you've just explained, the ordinance puts a process or a procedure in place to allow elected officials, county board members, to have increased oversight over any order issued by the health department director. Is that a correct or incorrect statement?
That's a correct statement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Anton.
Yes, we've had a city-county health department for some years. COVID is relatively recent.
Supervisor Anton?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Supervisor Anton.
Chair Smeyer, I can hear him.
Okay, my question is what motivated...
Okay, I'll go on at least temporarily to the next speaker, and that was...
I could hear him as
losing
well.
my list.
Hear him.
We could hear him. Supervisor Schneider.
Just one second, guys. Chair Smeyer, can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Somebody nod your head.
I can't hear you.
I can hear Chair Schmeier.
You can hear me.
I can hear you. This is Nancy Coffey, but you couldn't hear.
I'm sorry, I'm having a problem at my end. Supervisor Schneider, please go ahead, and I'll try to connect my audio.
My question is, does the ordinance at all affect the public education component of what the health director does?
Not that I'm aware of. And in fact, one of the discussions that we have had about enforcement over the course of this most recent pandemic is
I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. I don't have audio for some reason.
Yes, you do.
Would you wave a hand if you can hear me? Oh, okay. But I can't hear you.
And to answer your question,
I'm not sure what to
Supervisor
do at this
Schneider,
point.
is
Samantha,
that
can you help me? You're gonna have to do it with sign language. I can't hear.
Try to unplug your headphones.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Supervisor Bates, would you take over temporarily, please?
I will. And I believe that,
I was answering.
I think.
I was answering Supervisor Schneider's question, if I could finish.
Please do that.
Thank you. You know, for education purposes, that is part of any enforcement that's done through the health department. The approach, first of all, is if there is a complaint, to investigate it, to meet with the person that is being potentially violating any orders, to explain to them the rules, try and get compliance. And that's really the goal. Ultimately here is compliance. Citing somebody, giving them a fine doesn't stop the spread of the disease. Complying with the health order, both from the state and the local level, that's what stops the disease. And so that's really the goal here is education. That's the first goal, I should say.
Can you hear me?
I'll go back to Supervisor Anton.
Yes. My question has to do with the reason why or the motivation for this document at this time. We've had a city county and recently we came up with COVID. We're doing this now general for communicable diseases. Why are we doing it at?
Why are we doing it now? We're doing it now largely because of the Palm decision, which put the state of the law with regards to health orders in question. And the Palm decision at the state level did give some guidance about how orders of local health officers and state health officers should be issued. And so that's how this ordinance is drafted in compliance with that decision.
And so Samantha, could you give me the name of the next individual?
Supervisor Beckfield.
Supervisor Beckfield, please.
I didn't know I was there, so I'll pass.
And I believe Supervisor Crunk has a follow-up question.
Supervisor Crunk, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So if I have a two-part question. If this ordinance passes, this could potentially, or could this potentially slow down any of the orders from the health director that she deems necessary because of process, because of times of our meetings, or things coming through, obviously the county board? That's the first part. Could that potentially slow down any necessary orders that she makes? And my second question is to clarify, if somebody receives a citation as it is now through the health department and they want to contest it, what is that process, and what would the contesting process be if this ordinance passes?
So I'll answer your second question first. If you receive a citation, you have the right to challenge it in court just like any other citation. You have a right to a trial. It goes to a court. You can have a jury trial if you want to pay for it. It's the same process as any other ordinance violation. So that's the answer to that question. As far as slowing the orders down, and normal circumstances, this would have somewhat of a delaying effect because of the procedural safeguards. There is a requirement for publication as a class 1 notice, which is a one-time publication of any orders that are issued by the health officer. But there's also a provision, and that's in 8.30.060 sub D, but there's also a provision sub E that orders issued during emergency declaration shall contain a statement as to the purpose, local conditions, so on and so forth. And those essentially, hang on, make sure I got the right section here. Oh, it is actually in D. If you read the last sentence of D, is what I'm looking for. Orders issued during an emergency declaration shall be effective immediately, and publication according to the subject shall be made as soon as practicable. So in normal circumstances, if she's issuing an order that is not in an emergency situation, it would have to be published, and it still has to be published even in an emergency situation. An emergency declaration, it would become effective immediately, and then publication would be soon as practicable. And the reason that's in there is that if we need to take action right now, there's a possibility of doing that. That doesn't affect the ability of the county board to review the ordinance. If the order is issued by the health officer today, as early as tomorrow or next week, the board could convene to review it and decide whether or not they want to convert it to an advisory order or approve it. It's up to the board at that point. The only language there that is different is an emergency versus a normal situation. That publication may slow it down. Publication usually takes maybe a week. But otherwise, in emergency situation, if it has to happen right now, the order would go into effect, and then publication would happen as soon as practicable. So
both processes to contest a citation are the same right now, no matter what this ordinance, if this ordinance passes or not.
Well, to contest a citation, you would have to go to court. Citation is different than the order. The order being, if you want to have, you don't agree with the order of the health officer, then the process is to bring it before the board and have it reviewed by the board. Citation is a ticket that you would bring to court then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Samantha, are there any other questions?
Supervisor Chilson.
Supervisor Chilson, please.
Thank you. My question is in relation to the duties and items outlined in the ordinance. My question is in relation to the Wisconsin Counties Association website in the guidance and implementing regulations surrounding communicable diseases. It states it's an analysis of local health department and local health officer powers, duties, and enforcement actions. My specific question, if I can get back to my page here. Bear with me just a second. I'm going to reference something out of that guidance, and that's going to be the basis of my question. So in one of the pages in this health guidance, it talks about in a court order for isolation or quarantine, it talks about the either the sheriff's department of a particular county, the local health officer, or some other entity shall, under point number 2, it says, shall detain and transport John B. Doe to the name of a medical facility listed in a particular city. So my question is this item on WCA's website in relation to what we're on? Can I conclude that the health officer or health department would have enforcement authority to detain and transport individuals to a health facility?
That's, let me say that authority does exist within Chapter 252. It is not addressed by this ordinance because this ordinance is about general orders of application. What you're talking about is isolation and quarantine for individuals who have infectious diseases. That process is also set forth in Chapter 252. It's later on in Chapter 252. I don't know the specific subsection at this point. We actually have a process for that in Eau Claire County that we've developed with the court. How that process works is that the individual is known to be in contact with someone who's infected, which would result in potential quarantine, or is actually infected, which would result in isolation. The health officer can issue an order requiring that person to isolate or quarantine during the time period that they are known to be potentially going to develop the disease if they've been in contact and need to be quarantined, or while they are infectious for isolation purposes. That order issued by the health officer typically requires the person to stay home. We have in the past and during this process had people stay in hotels with quarantine guards. People generally stay there as a result of the order that's issued by the health officer. If they do not comply with the health officer's order, the next step is then we file a petition in the court. And the court hears the matter and decides whether or not the person will be isolated or quarantined as a result of their infectious disease or contact with someone who has the infectious disease. We've actually gone through that process in Eau Claire County. And at that point, the court can order an individual isolated or quarantined until such time as determined by the health department to no longer need isolation or quarantine. That is a separate process than what we're talking about in this ordinance. This ordinance is talking about general orders of application. General orders of application, again, are orders that talk about occupancy limits, gathering limits, all of the things that you've seen in the most recent local health orders by the health officer.
Supervisor Myers, are you on now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm back. All right. I think I see Supervisor Beckfield's hand raised. Is that for the second time speaking?
No, I'm passing. I don't have it. It doesn't show that I'm asking to either. I don't know what the problem is, Chair. I'm sorry.
It's probably my computer. My apologies. I see no other hands raised at this point. And I notice that under the oral reports, Administrator Schaaf is listed. Administrator Schaaf, did you wish to say anything?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will go on then to written reports you have in your packet. First of all, from the Finance Department, the 2020 Contingency Fund and the September 2020 payments over $10,000. Are there any questions regarding those two items? I see no hands raised. Next item on our agenda under item 7, presentation of petitions, claims, and communications. We have a rezoning request from owners Dana and Cheryl Turner and applicant Peter Gartman for the town of Brunswick. This item will go on to our next agenda. Next under item 8, first reading of ordinances by committee, file 78.
To amend Title II Chapter Table Administration and to amend Chapter 2.75 County Risk Management Program.
This is the ordinance. This is first reading, I believe. This will go on to our next agenda. Thank you. Next, under item 10, reports of standing committees, commissions, and boards under 2.04.160. From the Committee on Administration, file 73.
to create Chapter 8.30 of the Code, Communicable Disease, and to amend Section 1.50.02 of the Code, Citation Code.
Thank you. This is second reading. The chair requests a motion.
Schneider moves adoption.
Movement by Supervisor Schneider. Second.
By Supervisor Gatlin.
The second by Supervisor Gatlin. I'm not sure who to ask for explanation on this. It's from committee administration. This would fall to Supervisor Bates. Would you wish to refer this to anyone else, or would you want to handle the background on this?
I think since this is just a report coming out of the committee, that I can perhaps speak to it. The committee.
No, this is an ordinance. It's on the floor now. It's been moved and it's on the floor.
Okay. Well, I'm in speaking to it then.
Okay.
I think what you've heard over this significant period of time is a lot of explanation in regard to this ordinance, outlining actually a lot of what it is and also what it isn't. So basically, in looking at what this ordinance really does is really to set parameters for the health department and to certainly look at enforcement of any issue that may come up, more so on a local level, and considering most of all the need to be able to really communicate clearly to each other what we see and how to respond to it. I hope that individuals that are on the board will have had the opportunity to feel more comfortable with this ordinance, and we'll look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Supervisor Gibson, followed by Supervisor Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman Smyer. Listening to everything tonight, reading all the emails and everything else, given that this situation is very important that we get this right. The email that all of us received from Scott Rogers, the Government Affairs and Workforce Director from the Eau Claire Chamber of Commerce, and the CEO that spoke tonight, indicates that policy questions within the ordinance and would be better served if they arrived with input from the business community, our educational institutions, our healthcare organizations, and others. And if we listen to the public, there was a tremendous amount of them opposed versus those that were in favor. So they were encouraging the county board to take a similar path as the city council did. Therefore, I will move that we postpone this resolution indefinitely and work together with the city council and come back with a new resolution that is much more clear.
But the motion to postpone indefinitely might be difficult to handle. May I suggest that you change that to a motion to postpone to time definite and then list a time definite? We could always take it up before that or at that time. But
well, I don't know if we could put a definite time on that, Chairman Smyer, because we don't know how long it would take and how long it's going to be to work with and coordinate everything with the city council so that both the city and the county, because it is a city county health department, to coordinate this and finalize it.
I understand. I'll need a little advice from our corp counsel.
The problem is if you're voting, you're moving to table this, essentially postpone it to an indefinite period. And if it doesn't come back in the next session, meaning our next meeting, then essentially it dies.
It's essentially the same as a motion to table then.
Correct. And so put a time definite on it, then it'll come back at that time definite. It can be reviewed at that time, or another motion to table to a later date could be made at that time.
Right. And go along with that, just so everybody understands, the reason why I worded it the way I did and said indefinitely was for that very same reason, because I don't know as if we can put a time on it. And if we come back with a new resolution,
Well, you could put a time consistent with the cities if that's your intent.
Okay, well, we can do that too.
We could always, if we make it phone to a time definite, Tim, can we bring it back before that point?
Yes.
Okay, so Supervisor Gibson, I suggest that we make it a motion to postpone to time definite and perhaps name the same time as the city, understanding that we can bring it back at any time before that if we wish. Would that be acceptable?
No, that wording is fine. If we can, say that we'll bring it back with the city, that's fine.
Okay. So I believe that the city is stated June 2021. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. Supervisor Gibson, is it okay to name that as time definite?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your motion. I couldn't even see your lips move on that. Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting a little playful here. Did we hear a second on that? Samantha, do we have a second? Send it to Samantha.
Second by Supervisor Roberts.
Okay, thank you. Second by Supervisor Roberts. So we are on the motion to postpone to time definite. Any questions, discussion regarding that motion? It is a debatable motion, by the way.
Mr. Chair, I have my hand up.
A couple hands up. We'll start with you, Supervisor Bates.
Thank you. I do have some concerns about actually postponing this, and mainly because we're thinking about postponing it until spring. The health situation that we have is now. In fact, there were something like 19 more new cases as of this morning. I can't help but think that, again, this is an action for inaction. I believe that everything that is within this ordinance is reasonable. I think it's actually very much what we've been doing for quite some period of time. It has put some parameters around it in hopes that people will be more comfortable with it. And it also gives us the authority that indeed, if this doesn't seem to be working in a reasonable way, that we can ask for it to come back. But really and truly, to think about putting this off is, to me, just especially till spring, is not a real logical move. We're talking about a health situation that certainly may not be a real acute crisis in the sense of a number of deaths, but it's a crisis when you consider the amount of work missed, of schools interrupted, of university schedules interrupted. I think to do nothing until spring is not really a logical thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman Smyer. I support this measure, and I'll get into why here in a moment. First, I'm going to read a quote from Administrator Schaaf that we all had in our packet. She says, "In a situation where City Council and County Board do not agree on the appropriateness of a general order and one body approves while the other does not, that will create a patchwork of expectations and enforcement that will add confusion, questions, and ultimately impact the effectiveness of managing the communicable disease." If we enact this, we're essentially telling 40% of the county's population that you have to abide by this, while 60% or greater doesn't have to. That's problematic, and it's going to create an enormous PR problem. Not to mention that enforcement of any subsequent orders is going to be nearly impossible for people to manage because of the confusion that it's going to add. So I support this measure. I hope you all do too. That's all I had. Thank you, Chairman Smeyer.
Just for clarification, you're supporting the postponement or you're supporting the ordinance?
The postponement.
Thank you. Supervisor Coffey, followed by Christopherson, followed by Neiman, followed by Knight, followed by Dunning, followed by DeLuca. Sorry about that. I'll try to keep to that sequence. Supervisor.
Thank you, Supervisor Smeyer. I really, it's a difficult balance. I understand that I wish there would have been, that the city would have passed this, because indeed, I, like Supervisor Bates, worry very much about it getting colder outside and people coming together indoors, and that this is going to become even more of a difficult problem. I do like the idea of one of our citizens about using the shared committee that we have. And I do think that it would be very good if that shared governance committee got together and worked this out with the city. I think that the consistency is good. I'm most worried about the timeline being June. That's way too late because of the cold weather that is going to possibly and very likely cause this to rise very quickly. So I'm going to not vote for this change. I don't support the amendment because of the fact of the timeline. I think it's way too late.
Just for clarification, a reminder that yes, it does match the city's timeline, but as the city knows and possibly would do, we can bring this back at any time, even before that time definite.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Supervisor Christopherson.
Thank you, Chair Smeyer. First, I want to thank all the work that has been put into this, and I definitely support the science behind all of this, and I think that we do need to do something to protect our community. However, I feel like we need to consider adopting further language that the city put forth. I spent a great deal of time listening to their meeting, and so I would like to offer further resolution to what's been presented.
It would have to be, excuse me, it would have to be, I think, in the form of an amendment to the amendment, to the motion.
Thank you. So I would like to propose an amendment to the amendment. And I want to share with you what the city council decided to put forward. So I'm reading from the city council packet. They stated, now therefore be it further resolved that the Eau Claire City Council of the City of Eau Claire, that the public health director and the city manager bring a revised engagement plan and recommendations to form a task force to the Eau Claire City Council on or before January 25th of 2021 in the form of a city council work session. That includes an update on the proposed task force membership and community engagement, including a shared understanding of the process that will be used to engage our community on the strengths and limitations of amending section 8.04.021. And then they went on to one more part of that. Be it further resolved that the public health director and city manager are empowered to apply their professional judgment to shorten that time frame.
Okay. So is your motion, your amendment, we'd have to substitute the word county in there somewhere to make it ours.
Yes,
okay.
I do think that's what we should do.
Okay.
I think, yes.
I'm sorry. We have an amendment. Is there a second for the amendment? Samantha?
I see none at this time.
Sorry?
I'll second.
Well, all right, I'll take it by voice. Sorry.
I got my hand up.
Well, your hand isn't speaking loudly. I was trying to do it through chat, but that was Supervisor Hambuck Boyle, right?
No, McKinney.
At first? Did you? I can't, I don't know who's seconding it.
Supervisor McKinney, Supervisor McKinney.
Thank you. Okay. Please do this by chat to Samantha. So we have it seconded by Supervisor McKinney, was that?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. So any discussion of the amendment? Oh, now I won't know who's speaking to that. I see Supervisor Cronk's hand went up in response to that. So I'm going to recognize Supervisor Cronk speaking to the amendment.
Just as a clarifying question to that amendment. So this goes to a task force. And I needed clarification. I'm sorry, I was having a little bit of a hard time hearing who's on that task force. And this is completely separate from the shared governance committee, correct?
It's separate from the, my understanding is it would be separate from the committee. We county board, or I as a chair, set up the task force and appoint the county people to it. And I'm assuming that the intention is a joint task force with the city. Am I correct? Anybody?
That is what I would propose, Chair Smyer.
Okay.
That was my Chair Smyer. This is Supervisor Gibson. That was my exact. That was my exact intent. So
I thought it might be. Okay. I'm having difficulty because there are still hands raised from before the amendment. So I'm going to ask you all to take your hands down. And now anyone who wishes to speak, to ask a question or have a discussion, I see Supervisor Dunning. I'll recognize you first, followed by Supervisor Knight, followed, I think, by Supervisor DeLuca. Correct? Okay. Supervisor Knight.
Sorry, Supervisor Smyer, this is Dunning. You called on me first.
Oh, I apologize. This hand raising thing is quite confusing. So Supervisor Dunning, go ahead, followed by Supervisor Knight, and I think followed by Supervisor DeLuca. So Supervisor Dunning, go ahead.
Several things that go. When in the discussion that we had earlier, the state is still driving this issue. And regardless of how long we play around with delaying it or whatever, the state still has its issue going. Leaving this up for 7 months is a real problem, as expressed by Supervisor Bates. I think the Chamber of Commerce, if they have if they're the ones who I believe should be leading the education along with the health department of the businesses that are involved. And then to respond to the idea that if we did it ourselves, 40% the city would be affected differently. Well, by delaying it, 20% of the whole county is affected adversely as a result of probably 20% of us are in an elderly or in a compromised, maybe even higher condition. I heard today that 40% of our whole population is in a compromised position and is affected by the virus. So
excuse me, Supervisor Dunning, we should be discussing the amendment that was made.
The amendment was to add the task force and add that and to go along with it. I'm saying we should if we're going to do the task force, it's got to be done immediately, not 7 months down the line.
Okay, my point is we have to deal with the amendment first. It has to do with the task force, and then come to the motion that Supervisor Gibson made. So at this point, may I call
Chair Smyer?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Supervisor Gibson. Just to comment on what Supervisor Dunning just said, if you go back to what Supervisor Christofferson said, she read right from their, I guess their notes that were on the website, and they're trying to make an attempt to get this done by January. So let's not assume that it's going to be June or July when this whole thing is resolved. We need to figure out and get this right. Like I said at the beginning, it's important for us as a county to get this right. And we need to work with the city.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're speaking in favor of the task force amendment.
Yes, if it's the
Okay,
task
thank you.
force that the city is putting together, then the county, we need to join into that so that both the city and the county are on the same page.
Well, we would accomplish that if we vote that amendment regarding the task force. If we vote that up, then we're back to your motion with that amendment in it. And I think that accomplishes what you're looking for, I believe.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I think I don't want to cut off anyone's comments, but I think that we can save a lot
Schneider
of.
has a question.
Supervisor Schneider.
If I'm understanding the amendment is to appoint a task force by January.
I don't think there was a date on that piece. The date is in the main motion that Supervisor Gibson made.
The cities which they were paralleling, I think, said the task force would be appointed by January.
Yeah, January
21st.
20.
My apology, I missed that.
Chair
did you want to
Smyer,
make?
may I be recognized, please? This
Oh,
is
hold on,
Supervisor
please. I want to
Christopherson.
finish with Supervisor Schneider. So, Supervisor Schneider, were you speaking in favor of that January date?
I was asking a clarifying question.
Sorry.
What is the amendment to the amendment? And if I'm correct, the amendment to the amendment is appoint a task force by January 21st.
I think you are correct. Now, I don't know who it was who asked to speak next. Who was that?
Well, I think we should ask Supervisor Christopherson to clarify those dates.
Supervisor Christopherson.
Thank you, Chair. The clarification on the date that was specified by the city is January 25th of 2021. That is when they are going to have a task force appointed at the latest date. So
as the chair, I can say that since the chair would be appointing task force and so on, I can accomplish that in that time frame.
And with as part of the amendment, though, we are adding the language that the chair can be empowered to apply their professional judgment to shorten that time frame. So to provide a little history on that, the city is going through some leadership changes with the city manager, and that is why they put a date out as far as they did.
Okay.
During the city council meeting, they did discuss trying to expedite that process to try and get a task force in place more quickly than January.
Well, to answer part of what I think was your question or your comment, we don't need a special motion to authorize the chair. Corp Counsel, I believe that I have the authority to appoint to a task force once we agree that we want to have one. Is that correct?
Generally, yes.
So we don't need to have a motion to authorize the chair. Okay.
The part of it is that we could do it sooner than January 25th.
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
This is Knight. I was next in line.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Knight. I'm losing track because of the discussion. So let's use voice for recognition. Supervisor Knight, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against the amendment. We're COVID is surging right now in the Midwest and in Eau Claire. We're going into what looks like it will be a dark winter. by next spring, there will hopefully be a workable vaccine that is being widely distributed. So really this winter is going to be it's going to be the crux. And I see no reason not to pass this ordinance tonight, which I'm not quite sure what all the excitement is about. But at the same time, we could convene a task force. At the time that the task force has its recommendations, we could come back and revisit this ordinance and fix what's wrong with it.
Well, that would be the point of having a postponement to a time definite. Even if you put the time definite later, we can call it back at any time. What we're trying to deal with, what I'm trying to deal with here, is the amendment that was made regarding the task force. If that motion is approved, we're back to the motion that Supervisor Gibson made with that amendment in it, and that, I believe that accomplishes exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I don't want to postpone the vote on the first ordinance. I think we need to get that on the books right away, no matter what the city council did.
I misunderstood your point. Yeah. So you are supporting the amendment? No,
I oppose the amendment. I think we ought to get rid of that. I think we ought to pass the ordinance as proposed, the original ordinance, and then if we want, we can form a task force or get together with the city and form a task force that will later come back and fix up anything that needs to be fixed. But we're going into a dark period right now. We're going to lose people this winter. I mean, every time we get frustrated with COVID, it resurges. This is the third surge. It's the worst we've had. I think we're neglecting our responsibility to the health of the county residents, of which there are over 100,000. If we kick this down the can like the city council did.
Okay. Is there other comment?
Supervisor
I'm trying to sort our way through this. What? I'm sorry?
Sorry, Supervisor DeLuca has been waiting for a while now.
Supervisor DeLuca, please.
I'm to the amendment. I am not happy or pleased about that they're going to bring back a document and to create the task force is going to start January 25th. I mean, it could. Granted, they can bring it sooner. I know Supervisor Christopherson mentioned that. But they do have an interim manager right now, city manager, that can work with that task force. I think the task force needs to be done sooner because once you make the task force, it's going to take a couple of months before you work together and come up with a plan to change the ordinance. So I don't think we should wait that long, and I'm actually a little bit more in agreement with Supervisor Knight. I know there might be some issues with the ordinance that we have. We could maybe fix some of them this evening, but it might be quicker to do the ordinance, get the task force, fix the ordinances, and move forward from there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. By voice, anyone else?
Supervisor Cronk.
Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you. I'm wondering about, and I'm speaking to the amendment, because the committee on, or the commission, the Joint Commission on Shared Services already exists. I'm trying to understand the rationale of not incorporating that rather than another task force. Perhaps the task force, the idea behind it was to have broader membership rather than just the county, the city, and the school board. However, that does already, I believe, it's still in effect, still exists. So that is something that could perhaps take this on sooner because it's already in existence. And just to re-clarify, this is a local ordinance. This does not mean that the health director does not have the authority to do everything that already exists in our state statute. So it's not as if we're doing nothing. Our health department director already has all of the authority. The ordinance we're trying to create and get correct and have in cohesion with the city is limiting that authority. So that authority already exists to handle what is happening with orders for COVID.
I have a question for Corp Counsel. Does shared services still exist? I know there was a question there.
I don't know. I think that might be a better question for the administrator.
Administrator Schaaf?
Yes, thank you. The Shared Services Committee has not, at this point, been active for some time. And my recollection of the intent of shared services was limited strictly to administrative function. And so the purview would change if, and it would have to be agreed upon by the city because the purview would change significantly over what it was initially created to do. Meaning this is a policy decision versus simply administrative process. And I do not know if the Shared Services Commission lines up with the vision nor the intent of the City Council. The understanding that I have regarding their action is that they desire to have more input from a variety of sources and additional persons at the table that represent our community.
Thank you.
Supervisor Neiman?
Supervisor Neiman, but please go ahead.
I have received emails and contacts that are in support of this ordinance, but said that if we did not pass an ordinance and decided to go with a task force, that we should do it as soon as possible. I think we've heard a lot from people who are not in favor of the ordinance, but I feel a responsibility to represent those people that don't have the resources and ability to organize so that they can be heard. I feel like I'm responsible for all of the citizens in the county. And so we need to proceed on what's best for the county as a whole. I think if we're going to go the task force route, that we need to do it with all possible speed. And if we can't do that, then I think we need to address the ordinance itself.
Thank you. Supervisor Schaafnagel.
Yes.
I see your hand up. I don't know if that means you want to speak to this.
Yes, and I am agreeing with Supervisor Knight, and I think Supervisor Neiman, and I believe Supervisor Bates and DeLuca. I want to see us shoot for an approved ordinance, and if there's a task force that can make it stronger, have that come together. But by golly, I would like to see us come to an agreement of a finished product on or before January 21st or 25th. It's ridiculous. We have to take some action that will make our citizens protect themselves and each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Dunning, is your hand just still up, or do you want to speak again?
Speak again.
Go ahead.
I'm in agreement with Supervisor Knight and Kronk and Schaafnagel as far as what we're doing here. We've got to get this going. We cannot get that task force. We could appoint it tomorrow. So, I mean, get it started. There's serious stuff out there, and it needs to be done. So I guess I'm opposed to the amendments, and however many there are at the moment, and get back to the original agreement. If we have to amend it to appoint a task force starting tomorrow, that would be an amendment also. So that's where I'm at.
Well, the amendment does establish a task force,
but there were dates that were not satisfactory.
Okay. Are you? I don't want to make this more complicated than that it needs to be. let me go back to the amendment and the date.
Well, we've got an amendment that puts city wording in, and I think that should be voted down. Then we get back to Gary's, to Supervisor Gibson's.
Excuse me. The motion was to alter that passage and remove city and put the word county in. So yes, we are using the city's wording, but changing it to apply to the county.
So
is that correct?
So we would not be joining with the city?
No. We have to pass our own motion regarding task force that authorizes the establishment of task force by the county, with the understanding that it would be done jointly with the city. That's my understanding of it.
Could we get Supervisor Christopherson to change the dates on there to immediate?
Supervisor Christopherson.
I would be in favor of that. I guess my only concern with that would be if we could get the city to adhere to that as well. I think with pressure from the chair that the interim city manager may be able to work together and appoint a task force, because it has to be collaborative, is what I think we're trying to do.
We're trying to do that, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm all in favor of that.
Supervisor Gibson, okay. Going along with Supervisor Christopherson and Supervisor Dunning's statement, there's no reason why we can't appoint as a county, as Supervisor Christopherson said, changing it to county, there's no reason why we can't as a county establish and start a task force immediately, and then whatever dates or work and coordinate that we can't work with the city at even tomorrow or at some near future date.
Okay. What we can't do, I don't think, is change it to say collaborative task force of the city. We can't pass a motion that somehow or other obliges the city. So I suggest that we leave the wording as it is. We can change the date. Supervisor Christopherson, was there a date in there? I'm trying to remember. Was it January?
Yeah, the date that the city set and the date that I spoke of was January 25th. I would be willing to change my amendment to say a task force will be formed immediately, if that would be appropriate.
As chair, I would work on doing the ASAP.
So can we change that amendment then?
Technically, no, but actually we're going to do it. We're not going to follow the rule. Technically, we'd have to amend the amendment. Let's not do that. Let's simply change the date in the motion in the amendment that you made. Okay.
Okay.
And you can report me for violating Robert's rules. So what would you propose, Supervisor Christopherson?
So I would propose that the Eau Claire County creates a task force to create an ordinance, and the task force be appointed immediately by the chair.
Okay. I'm thinking about that for a moment.
What was the word you used? There was a word in there I didn't hear. Something about task force.
Create was the word she used.
I think the intention was to create a task force as soon as possible.
Yes.
I wonder, Supervisor Christopherson, I wonder if we could, and I have to ask Corp Counsel this too, I wonder if we could say establish a task force with the purpose of collaborating with the city's task force.
You have to get the person who made the motion to agree to amend their motion.
Okay. I was trying to avoid that. Okay. Actually, we can do what the assembly wishes to do according to Robert's rules. So
what I'm saying is that if Supervisor Christopherson wants to amend her motion to that, her motion to amend the original motion, and then vote on that. I don't know that I'm sure we're skirting the rules of Robert's rules.
We are
moving this process along.
Supervisor Schroffnagel here. I want to make
wait.
a small point.
Hold on, please. Let's resolve this point first, and then I'll come back to you.
Mine is part of the point. I believe it's not just the city council and the county board. I know the business community wants to be on this said task force as well.
Well, that would be the composition of the task force. My understanding is that my job as the chair under this proposal would be to constitute a task force drawing on not just members of the county board, but members of the community.
Okay, if everybody remembers back to my motion and what I stated to start this whole thing, my statement was, Supervisor Schroffnagel, was the business community, the educational institutions, the healthcare organizations, and anybody else that wanted to be involved.
Oh. Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Bates.
I have my hand up. Thank you.
Oh, gee, you do. Sorry.
Thank you. I think the primary purpose of a health department is health. And somehow or another, we're looking to put a lot of detail into what is actually an ordinance about the health department. As we do that, I think we're really creating a situation where the health of the citizens can become secondary to all sorts of other considerations. If you look at the way that the state law was developed, and certainly this ordinance, it has been really done by individuals who are absolutely familiar with the issue of contagion. Their first and primary reason is about to be able to stem the tide of contagion. It has really nothing to do with much of anything else. As we begin to take into consideration all the other ramifications, we have to be careful that the contagion part of this doesn't become secondary. And so I'm not in favor of actually postponing this. I'm in favor of passing the resolution or the ordinance as it is. And then if you want details that are strictly the flexibility to do something as it pertains to what is local, you can do it. But in the meanwhile, you have a health ordinance.
Thank you.
Supervisor Anton with a comment or question?
Supervisor Anton.
In order for any position that the county health board might take or the county board might take, it's necessary, we recognize that the people involved have to come to the party. They can't be off doing something different. I mean, we aren't going to make this work with sending the sheriff out. People have to want to do it. With that in mind, I think it is a really good idea to have a task force that incorporates, as Supervisor Gibson has said, the members of the community, so that we make this work. because it isn't likely to work if we just pass a resolution and say, this is it, and the population doesn't buy into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisors, I think we have to sort our way through this. It's becoming quite confusing. So I'm going to take these things in order. First, I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment regarding the task force and the January date. I'm going to do this by a voice vote. Now, recognize, please, that I'm not stating a position on it. I'm simply saying, let's sort our way back through it. So first of all,
Supervisor Smyer, you just said January date. I thought Supervisor Christopherson changed that to immediately.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're correct. You're correct. But I
restate the amendment before we vote.
And Supervisor Neiman, I request a roll call vote.
We can do that.
Yeah.
We had a request to state the amendment that we're voting on. So can I ask the clerk to state the amendment?
Supervisor Christopherson was reading from the city ordinance.
Right.
And I did not get all the language. If you could ask Christopherson to read again, I would appreciate that.
Recognize that we would change city to county in that passage. Supervisor Christopherson.
Would like me to read the full part of the city, is that correct?
What's your amendment is going to be? What? Okay. I know you said it came from the city ordinance, but what is your actual amendment?
Okay. That the amendment to the task force, that the county board chair will appoint a task force as soon as possible to address the ordinance.
Clerk Loomis.
Yes.
Sorry, did you get it?
I believe what she said this time was different than before, but.
Well, yes. I think that's because there's a lot of amendments. So, I mean, in consideration of what Supervisor Gibson, and I'm just providing additional language to what Supervisor Gibson.
Your amendment to the postponement, which was the motion before you, amendment to the postponement is to create a task force as soon as possible to address the ordinance. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. We are going to take a roll call vote on this amendment.
Supervisor Smyer?
Yes, ma'am.
I really have a hard time if we don't have a time that this is going to be done. It could last a year to get this done. So do we have an end date? I worry about when are we going to say this is going to be accomplished?
This is Tim Sullivan. The end date was put forth in Supervisor Gibson's motion, June 21st.
Okay, thank you.
Or June 2021.
Thank you. We have the word immediately or as soon as possible in this amendment. And I will tell you that I take that as direction to me, literally to do it ASAP, if that answers your question. Okay. Supervisor, Samantha, can you set up a roll call vote? Thank you. You have it on your screen, supervisors. Supervisor Schneider, you may have to indicate your vote verbally.
As well as Supervisor Anton.
I'm sorry?
Supervisor Anton is on the phone as well.
Do you want email or do you want verbal?
I think if you don't mind, we'll do verbal for you and Supervisor Anton.
Supervisor Anton votes yes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Schneider votes no.
Okay, thank you.
I'll find out how the rest of you voted later. I don't mind being verbally.
Thank you. Thank you. Samantha, how are we doing?
We are waiting on Chair Smyer, Supervisors Knight and Henning to submit.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to hit the submit. There you go.
Samantha, could you send me the poll again?
I don't think I can. If you look at the bottom of your screen, if you were to tap it and open up the 3 little dots and click on polling, that should bring it up.
Let's see.
I'm sorry, they've changed the app since I last looked at it.
Okay, here, I think I got it.
And Supervisor Henning, you are needing to submit. Thank you. I have 18 yes, or excuse me, 19 yes and 9 no.
The motion passes. Now we go back to the amended motion by Supervisor Gibson, as amended. I'm going to call for a roll call vote on that.
Could you please state the amendment again?
Clerk Loomis.
Gibson's motion was to postpone to June 2021. It has been amended by Supervisor Christopherson to create a task force as soon as possible to address the ordinance.
Supervisor Schneider, did I answer your question? Yes,
it did.
Okay. Samantha, can you send another poll vote on that? We're now voting on the amended main motion.
Schneider votes no.
Sorry. Supervisor Schneider, your vote?
No.
Supervisor Anton? Supervisor Anton?
In favor.
That was a yes vote. Thank you.
Waiting on Supervisor Dunning to submit. I have 16 yeses and 12 nos.
That is majority, and the motion does pass. We have disposed of this item through this vote. So at this point, supervisors, my understanding is I have the duty to pull together a task force as soon as possible, ASAP, and that the ordinance has been postponed to a time definite. And our understanding is, even though that time definite may seem to be far off, we can pull it in at any time we choose to do so. So let's assume that the task force does its work fairly quickly. We can bring a vote on the ordinance onto the board floor. I hope that's clear. Okay. We're going to move on to
Supervisor Smyer.
Yes, sir.
Does the state code still exist then? So anything that's done in the state, the health director has the authority to do?
Corp Counsel?
Yeah, the statutes are still in effect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're moving on to file 80.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just one more question. In your task force, are you going to try and include business, school,
Yes.
city council, all that? Okay, thank you.
I'll try to. What I intend to do is connect with the city in its efforts in the task force to make sure we're not duplicating. But the intention is to involve persons who have the expertise and perspective and so on, across as broad a perspective as we can get. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Cronk?
Okay. Supervisor Cronk, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought we may have a little bit more time to discuss, which we didn't, and that's okay. I do appreciate your last comment, because one of the points I wanted to make was, as we've seen that that COVID-19 has disproportionately affected people of color, it's going to be very important to have a very broad task force. And then also my other point, as we're talking about enforcement, there's been a lot of work, beginning work within the county to try to recognize, and the city to try to recognize how things are being enforced. And so that is a conversation that I think needs to come forward. We've seen some very inequitable enforcement around COVID-19 and other things, around the country and perhaps even in our own community. So that is a huge concern that I have. And so I'm very grateful that this, COVID-19 is serious. I have friends, I have family, I have clients that have recovered, some have not. It is very serious, and I do speak as a nurse. I am hesitant to further restrict the health department's role. And I also appreciate the fact that we are trying to create a local ordinance in collaboration with the city so that the enforcement of it is clear and it's equitable. So thank you.
Thank you. I have a request for you, supervisors. I would accept any recommendations that you have across the broad spectrum of the community for the task force. I don't want to think of me trying to come up with it on my own. So I would appreciate any recommendations that you have ASAP. Okay? Once again, file 80.
Extending the existence of the Special Committee on Rural Broadband.
This is a resolution, so I'm looking for a motion.
Henning moves, but I gotta find my thing here so I can.
We'll accept the verbal motion. Thank you.
By Leary.
Second.
Supervisor Jansen.
Supervisor Jansen seconds. Thank you. For the background on this, I'm going to ask Supervisor Mowry, since he's been very involved in this.
Yes, you have a fact sheet as part of the packet that really lays out anything I would say. We have been meeting as a county broadband committee since last August of 2019. I think we've made a lot of progress. We brought a lot of people to the table, and we've involved a broad spectrum of people who have anything to do with broadband to the table as members. And we've worked with a lot of telecommunication companies, cooperatives, Eau Claire Electric Co-op, Tri-County Communications, 24/7. So, and we don't have any money, and the county doesn't seem to have any money right now to put towards broadband, but there are at least 3 projects that are going forward right now, but they're not going to be able to cover the whole county. And our goal is to bring high-speed internet border to border for all county residents, and to also address the issue of digital literacy and adoption as well. So we're asking for another year in order to continue, or actually the Committee on Administration amended the original resolution from 1 year to 24 months to 2 years. We're just asking the county board to approve our continuing efforts to increase broadband, especially to unserved and underserved areas of the county.
Thank you. I see a whole flock of hands raised, so I'm going to make an attempt here. Supervisor Beckfield, is your hand raised for this? Supervisor Beckfield?
Not me, fake news.
Okay, we'll have to teach you how to lower your hand, I guess. Supervisor Cronk, are you addressing this?
No, and I thought my hand was lowered. Sorry, I'll lower my hand.
Thank you. Supervisor Coffey. Supervisor Coffey.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No comment.
Oh, okay. Supervisor Beckfield figured out how to lower his hand. I think he's waving at us. But Supervisor Anderson, are you speaking to this broadband resolution?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to state that we've all seen in the past couple of months how access to broadband internet is important, even at the basic level of being able to participate in your and be a part of your community, given these extenuating circumstances, as well as be civically engaged to the amount that you deserve to be constitutionally. So I just even more deeply support this, given what we've all learned. That's all.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised. Supervisors will do this by verbally. Please unmute for a moment. Please unmute. All those in favor of file 80, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed by nay. Thank you. It passes unanimously. The next item is file 82.
Ratifying and affirming the Chippewa Valley Regional Airport petition for airport improvement aid dated October 16th, 2020.
Motion.
I have that Supervisor DeLuca motions to postpone.
Okay. I think that I think we should bring it onto the county board floor with a motion, and then I will accept the motion to postpone. So could we have a motion to bring it onto the board floor?
Motion by Supervisor Anderson.
I'm sorry, Anderson and who?
Felges.
Felges, thank you. Just to address this or background, Supervisor Felges, you wish to provide background on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a resolution to confirm a resolution that was passed by the Airport Commission. And that resolution allows the state to act as the airport's agent to implement capital projects. So when we have capital construction projects on the airport and those projects use any state or federal funds, the state actually becomes the project manager for that. And so the Airport Commission has agreed with that. We have some ongoing projects that we want to proceed on, but because the county, Eau Claire County, actually owns the airport, the Eau Claire County Board also has to ratify the resolution that the commission passed. And just, I think in our, somewhere, it probably doesn't show in this, but the commission did have a detailed list of some of the projects that they wanted to do and use some of this money. The money we're actually trying to use is some of the CARES money that was authorized, I believe, in March of this year. And that would include some hangar construction that has been in the master plan for the last several years, 7 years, I believe. And also improvement to lighting on the runways and some runway improvements. And so, and if there are any further questions, I do believe that our airport director, Charity, is on the line with us as well.
Okay. Supervisor,
Schneider with a question.
well, hold Supervisor Schneider. I have some prior requests, okay? I'll come back to you. Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm asking for a postponement of this resolution because the public hearing process was not conducive for appropriate public input regarding the massive impact the proposal development will have on the surrounding residents. The public hearing was scheduled at 7:30 in the morning on Friday. It was posted in the paper on Tuesday, October 7th, but if you don't get the paper, and a lot of the residents in my area don't subscribe to the paper, the information came out on Wednesday in a packet form. And if you were searching for public hearings, Googling just in general, you cannot access anything from Leader Telegram to pull up the notices that appear there. I did Google County Board specifically to see if it was on the calendar as a public hearing. It was not, but the meeting for the airport was. However, the public hearing was tucked inside the packet, so you had to open up the packet to be able to find it. The airport has 4 years to spend this money, this CARES Act money. And they're currently presenting a large development of about 21 hangars down on the south side. And I believe that the master plan also allows for hangar and corporate development on the north side. I believe the residents need an opportunity to share their concerns, and I think the public hearing process went awry this time. Thank you.
I'm assuming that somewhere in there was a motion. I think it was a motion to postpone. Could you be more definite?
Yeah, I asked for a motion to postpone this resolution. I guess if I had to put a date certain on it, I would choose to postpone until like County Board in January of 2021. That would give the airport and the commissioners a chance to reach out to the residents, create another public hearing so they could get comments and concerns from the residents in the area.
So your motion is to postpone to a time definite, January 2020.
Yes.
Thank you.
2021.
21, excuse me.
Second
is there
from
a second to that?
Schroffnagel.
Yes, Supervisor Schroffnagel?
Second.
Seconding, thank you. Let's see, any discussion or questions? Keep in mind that we have Charity here as well as the members of the commission. Go ahead.
This is Stelgis again. So first of all, this is a debatable motion, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I think I would let our director speak to some of these items that have been expressed by Supervisor DeLuca. However, it is my understanding that, the projects, the most immediate projects that are planned are not a massive expansion on the south side as stated. It's on the north side, actually, although other items were included in case the state or others rejected the applications to proceed with the north side activity. And these plans have been in place since the approved master plan in 2013. But with that, maybe we could have Charity speak a bit about what the public engagement has been up to this point.
Charity, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So I want to note that the sketch for the petition and the public hearing process included many hangars planned for future development at the airport. as is shown in our current master plan, which is located on our website and has been since 2013. It's been discussed in multiple public open houses during the master plan process and was also approved on a public agenda as a site plan by the City of Eau Claire Plan Commission in 2017. The intent of the Airport Commission is to develop a corporate hangar on the north side of the airport, but only if we can come to a suitable agreement with the tenant who would occupy the hangar. If we can't come to a suitable agreement, then we would pursue other hangar development, potentially on the south side, but not all hangars would be developed at one time. It would depend on which hangar we could come to a suitable agreement with a tenant to develop. Regarding the public notice, so we followed the state process for a public notice in the Leader Telegram. And the public hearing was in the commission packet, but I did talk to Planning and Development, who is another department in the county who hosts public hearings, and they indicated that their public hearings are contained in the Planning and Development packet in the same fashion as was the Airport Commission. So there was no intent to not include the public or, to hide the public hearing in any way. I believe that we practice due diligence in putting the notice out to the public. And then I also wanted to just touch on the tax dollar concern. So it's 100% the goal of the Airport Commission to no longer need local tax dollars to support the airport. And the revenue from new hangar development obviously moves the airport closer to that goal. And that would be certainly the intent here.
Thank you. Charity, would you mute your phone? I think it might be producing some problem. Thank you. Supervisor Jansen, followed by Supervisor Dunning.
So I have two quick questions. The first is...
I don't... What's happening there?
Are you on two, Supervisor Smyer, are you on two devices?
Sound is working.
Computer audio kick back in?
Yes, that's exactly right, Melissa.
Is that what happened?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you now. Yes, on the phone.
All right. I'm sorry. There were a couple of people who tried to speak at the same time. Right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Mike just kicked back in. My apologies.
No worries.
And thank you, Charity, for your comment. I think I called on Supervisor Jansen next.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Smyer. My first question, I have two quick questions for Charity. The first question is, how would a potential postponement affect the grant funding process? Would it delay that? Would it have any impact on that? And then the second question that I have is, if you do decide to eventually move forward with the hangar build because you've reached an agreement with the potential private party that would be interested in that, would there be a chance for public input before you move forward, or would you just act independently since that agreement was reached with that party?
Thank you for the questions. So any delays would just impact the timing of, when we were able to build the project. As you know, in Wisconsin, we're challenged with winter construction. And so the intent would be to get everything in place and bid the project so that we were able to construct early next year. We've already had on the agenda for the Airport Commission some review of an agreement with the tenant that we're working with right now. So far, that's been in closed session because we're negotiating. But that final agenda once completely negotiated, would be approved by the airport commission again at their public meeting.
Supervisor Jansen?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Dunning, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
Two things. One is that P&D does post their notices like that, but they also send a notice to those within a certain distance of the project. So that may be something that should be done when you're looking at these things. And the other item that I have goes back to the person who spoke. Goes back to the person who spoke at the beginning on the public hearing about the fact that the pollution was so bad from the engines that they could not be outside and that there's oil on the ground. These are environmental situations that are serious enough to cause major problems, you know, to those people, health-wise, etc. So this really needs to have an environmental impact statement as far as putting those hangars on the south side. And I would seriously suggest that we do that. If they're seeing oil on the ground, that's illegal. There's all kinds of laws that would protect that. And the same way with the air pollution. If it's so bad when they run the engines, you know, there's issues there. Am I still on?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. It seemed like I went totally quiet.
I think we might have lost Chair Smyer.
Okay. I don't know if Charity can respond to those comments or not, Supervisor Dunning, regarding noise and environmental pollution.
Well, those are legitimate. They are EPA laws. So,
sure they are. Yeah.
You need to be aware of them.
Yeah, this is Charity. Am I allowed to comment?
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
Okay. So we do an environmental review for every federal project. That's part of our checklist. It's part of the process, and that would be done as part of this particular hangar development as well. And there are various types of environmental reviews depending on the type of development. And regarding the oil issue, I guess that's the first time I've ever heard that. I will say that we have white-sided hangars in the South Hangar development that are completely white and don't have anything on them at all in terms of any black, like was referenced in the public comment. And we also mow probably a couple hundred acres at the airport and have never had anything like that mentioned by any of our team with anything black coming off the grass or anything like that. And we're obviously at the airport. So I don't know what to say about that other than that's the first I've heard about that. And then regarding the noise, we do a noise study as part of our master plan. And again, all of those documents are, you know, available on the airport website.
Thank you.
Is there Chair back online?
No, I believe the chair is still having problems.
All right. Then I think we'll try to continue on. Would you let me know, Samantha, whether there are other people who want to speak?
Supervisor Anderson?
Supervisor Anderson, please.
Yes, thank you. Bear in mind, my question might involve a complete misunderstanding of the resolution, but this would allow the state to complete state projects on the airport. Is that correct?
Well, the state becomes the construction project manager. They do the administrative part. of letting the contracts and handling the money and so on. That's what their role is.
Okay, but it would still only be county airport projects, if that phrase makes sense.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the second part is if they are the project managers, as I understand, and they're handling finance, would they pay for the projects, or would the county pay and then they would reimburse us?
Tim, you may have to answer that.
Maybe Charity knows the answer.
Yeah, yes, I can certainly answer that.
Thank you.
So all of the finances run through the state for our state and federal projects, and we pay the state our local share of those projects. In the case of the CARES funding, there is no local share.
But this would.
I'm back online again.
Supervisor Anderson?
Oh, thank you. But this would this would change even beyond spending CARES funds? Like, given 2 years' time, this would still be in effect, right?
So if we built a hangar, the revenue from that hangar would come back to the airport, essentially. So is that what you're asking? So if we rent the hangar, when we rent the hangar, the revenue that was derived from the rental of that hangar would be part of the airport revenue in our budget.
Charity, maybe you can explain a little bit in regard to the enterprise of the airport.
Yeah, I mean, so the airport is an enterprise fund. Our funds, we operate under an agreement between Chippewa and Eau Claire counties, and that agreement actually specifically vests the jurisdiction of the construction, improvement, equipment, maintenance, operation, and promotion of the airport to the Airport Commission. And the funds for the airport or derived on the airport are carried over annually under that agreement, essentially for the purposes of the airport to not ever have to come back to the county for any shortfalls in revenue or any large capital projects that come up.
Excuse me, I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Now you can.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what's going on here, but are we to the point of voting on the motion to postpone?
Other individuals interested in speaking? There's been no further action of any kind.
Yeah, I'd like to possibly amend the postpone motion to postpone to allow another public input session, because if we just postpone it and nothing changes, we won't have dealt with the concern of the individual that spoke in public comment. Would that be acceptable?
I think the proper way to do that may be to take the original motion to postpone to a time definite, and you can append that the statement about the purpose of that.
Is that acceptable to the mover?
I'd be happy to take that friendly amendment and change my postponement to include another public hearing to take place before the time definite of the first board meeting county board meeting in 2021.
Technically, Robert's Rules does not permit a friendly amendment. However, without objection from the assembly, we're going to go ahead and do that. So the motion now is postpone to a time definite. And what was that time definite?
The first county board meeting in January of 2021, which if it's the first Tuesday in January, that would be January 4th.
We have one meeting in January, and it'll be January 19, 2021.
Okay,
That's what
thank
it'll
you.
have to be then. And we are adding to that what phrase?
To include a public hearing to occur before that January 19th, 2021.
Okay, we can do that as the add-on to the motion to postpone. In the interest of time, supervisors, I suggest we vote on it. And so without objection, we're going to move to a vote, and we'll do it by voice vote. So what we're voting on is a motion to postpone to time definite, January the 19th, 2021. I'm sorry, I lost the wording for the rest of it.
To include a public hearing before the January 19, 2021 County Board meeting.
Thank you.
Mr.
Supervisor.
Chair, I would like to either have a poll vote or a voice vote, please.
Well, I was going to have a voice vote. Is that acceptable
Yeah.
to you? Yeah, okay. So supervisors,
Chair.
please unmute.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Stelzner, sir. So
Yes, sir.
we've already held one public hearing on this. So
Another one.
it's not clear to me what we're going to do again that's different.
Well, I think the intention is to include more of the residents. I believe that was what Supervisor DeLuca was seeking.
I understand that, but the amendment does not say anything to that effect. So if they're asking for something specific, a different time, a different notice mechanism, I mean, I think all the requirements were followed prior to this. So if we want to do something different than the standard procedure, then I think we need to state that. Otherwise, there's very likely that it will be concurrent with the next commission meeting.
All right, then can I change my motion then to address Supervisor Stelz's issue?
Well, at this point, we're accepting friendly amendments, so go ahead.
All right, so to postpone, let's see, just postpone to the first meeting to the January 19th meeting of 2021 with a public hearing to be held in the evening, 6 o'clock p.m. or later.
By the Airport Commission.
By the Airport Commission in December of 2020. So they have all of December to pick an evening to
Notice
have
to
this.
residents in the surrounding area.
Right, and to include information to go out to residents, at least on one.
I don't think
residence.
you can do that.
Okay, so
With all due respect, I mean, the commission has provided that information and they followed the legal notice. So are you suggesting that they use some other notice mechanism?
yes.
Is that for Charity?
Mr. Chair, this is Tim Sullivan.
Yes, Tim.
We are getting way far afield of Robert's Rules of Order here on how this.
Thank you. I was going to call for the vote simply to dispose of this. So it's up or it's down at this point, folks. So what we're voting on is a motion to postpone. What's the detail?
Mr. Chairman?
Who is that? I'm sorry, Ray Henning. Supervisor Henning.
Yeah, let the Corporation Council finish his sentence. This is a jumbled up thing. Let's get a legal opinion.
Well, my opinion is that We have a motion to postpone to January 21st for purposes of having a public hearing. That should be the motion that should be voted on.
Right, right. And that's what I'm seeking to do. So Supervisor Stelz's, what you could accomplish in terms of what you want to do is vote the motion down. Okay? So I'm calling for a voice vote. Please unmute. All those in favor of file 82 as amended postponement, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed to the motion to postpone, please indicate by saying no.
No.
The chair's judgment, the noes have it.
No.
On division, I'd like a roll call.
I asked for a roll call vote or a poll vote, and that, I don't believe
Division
was-
is when we used to do everything verbally. When there was doubt, we could call for division, and then that would mean we get a roll call or a poll vote.
Actually, you used the word voice, and that's what confused me. But that's fine. All right, Samantha set up a poll vote. It's in front of you now, supervisors.
Schneider, yes.
Done, yes.
Samantha, how are we doing?
1 second. I have 15 yeses and 12 nos.
15 yes.
That's
No,
not enough people.
The motion passes to postpone. We're going to move on in the interest
We're
of time
missing
here.
some votes. We're missing some votes.
27.
No. Missing 2.
Did you get them all, Samantha?
I'm showing everybody that logged in as submitted.
And what's the total?
But you had 2 verbal votes.
I understand I have 26 that have finished. I have no other in waiting and 2 verbal, so somebody must not be on.
We'll have to go ahead. So we have the 2 yes votes verbally. What's the total again?
With the 2 yes votes, it brings yeses to 15 and nos to 12.
Okay. The motion passes. We're moving on, folks. File 63. Oh, I'm sorry, file 77.
Authorizing the replacement of 1 highway maintenance supervisor with 1 heavy equipment operator in the county's bridge plan.
Motion.
Henning moves.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Gatlin.
Second by Supervisor Gatlin. Explanation, Supervisor Henning.
The bridge plan, so we didn't really have too much to do with it, but our committee was in favor of it 5-0.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? I hear none and see none. Pull up my list. Supervisor Dunning, your hand is up. You wish to speak? No?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I see you took your hand down. Thank you. I see no other hands raised. Supervisors will do this by voice vote. All those, unmute please. All those in favor of file 77, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by nay. The vote is unanimous. Thank you. File 63.
Authorizing the filling of the operations administrator position in the Department of Human Services.
Motion.
Motion by Bates.
Supervisor Bates moves, second.
Schneider.
Second by Anderson.
I heard Schneider first, second by Schneider. Explanation, Supervisor Bates.
Mr. Chair, I want to clarify. I'm assuming my motion was to recommend the position be filled.
Well,
Be taken off the bridge, is that what you were saying?
Yes, that it be taken off the bridge and filled.
well, the motion to authorize does that automatically. I believe. Tim? Tim?
I'm sorry, I did not hear. What was the question?
Well, Supervisor Bates wants to make sure that it's clear that this is coming off the bridge plan. And I'm saying I think that when we say authorize the filling of it, it does that in effect.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion, questions? I see no hands raised and I hear no voices. Supervisors, please unmute. All those in favor of file 63, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed by nay.
No.
Nay.
Okay. It's hard to count that. So
I think we need a poll.
give us a poll, please.
Give me just 1 second to set it up, please.
Please. Samantha, problem?
It just takes a second to set them up when they weren't ready.
Okay, sorry. I'm recognizing the time here and trying to move things along expeditiously.
I understand.
Benton, yes.
Schneider, yes.
Thank you.
The
Why my
poll I
poll
got
says
was about the
highway.
highway
That
position.
poll says highway. Yeah, that's not right.
I'm not going to vote on highway.
No, sorry.
You have to redo it then.
Did I misunderstand? Are we on file 63 and not file 77?
Yep.
We are on file 63. Yeah.
I got it.
Samantha, both Anton and Schneider both had a yes vote.
I'm waiting on Supervisor Pagonis to begin.
So where are we, Samantha?
Supervisor Russell, for some reason, you're not getting a dot next to you. Are you submitting without answering?
Without submitting, maybe.
No, I hit submit. When I click on my answer, it doesn't light up. I hit submit and it says that I have been submitted.
So it's going through with no votes. We just need to know your position.
Okay, just put yes down.
Thank you. that the last one, Samantha?
Yes.
Okay, what's the vote?
With 3 yeses, I have 20 yeses and 8 noes.
The motion passes. Thank you. Next file is file 64 from Committee on Finance and Budget.
Disallowing the claim of Donald Miller in the amount of $250,000 filed by his attorney, Stephen B. Goff, served on the Eau Claire County Clerk on August 10, 2020, directing the county clerk to notify the claimant of said disallowance.
Motion.
Dunning approve a motion.
Dunning moves. Second.
Pagonis will second.
Pagonis second. Thank you. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. This is a fairly routine item. The was driving in an underpass when the county plow trucks were on the overpass and some snow got on his windshield. And I don't, it's pretty self-explanatory. Our WMIC, our insurance company, reviewed the information and investigated the facts and recommends disallowance. So
thank you.
Committee on Finance and Budget agreed to disallow 5-0.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions about this one?
Question, because this is my first time with one of this kind of thing. Why did the insurance company, they were basically saying it's not a good claim, or?
Supervisor Pagonis.
I might need Attorney Sullivan to help, but my understanding is that there's a certain level of immunity associated with things like the plow trucks. We get several of these people driving by a plow truck and then they get, you know, something happens. So we do get some number of these. I believe that they have some other levels of recourse, but as far as the county is concerning, we are disallowing the claim.
And this is Tim Sullivan. That's exactly correct. Because they were involved in plowing operations, it's mandatory ministerial operations were required to plow. And so the injury was a result of something that we were doing that we were required to. So there's immunity that applies, and that's why the insurance company has recommended disallowance. It doesn't mean Mr. Miller and his attorney can't bring suit if they believe that there's still cause, but we do have to issue a disallowance first before they can pursue further with that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. I see no other hands raised. Supervisors, please unmute. And all those in favor of file 64, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. File 83.
Authorizing a 2020 budget transfer of capital projects fund.
Motion.
Leary.
Motion by Supervisor Leary, second by Supervisor Gatlin. Is that correct?
Sure.
Yes, okay. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the 2020 capital fund, several projects have come in under budget. So there is additional capacity within the Fund 405, which is capital fund. And so this resolution is to reallocate $124,279 of projects. Some of it to replace 2 dryers in the jail. That's very essential. And the second is for some self-contained breathing apparatus, scuba apparatus, also for the jail. And that's what the amount of $124,279 would be. So this is basically a transfer. This needs to be done on a poll vote, and we need a 2/3 approval.
questions or discussion? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices. Supervisors, please unmute. And all those in favor of file.
I think
Supervisor
you needed
Snyder,
a poll.
we need
Oh,
a
I'm
2/3.
Sorry, I apologize. Samantha, please set up a poll for it.
Yes, and I just want to clarify, it looks like Supervisor Beckfield has left the meeting, so the votes will only be up to 28.
Okay, thank you.
I did have a clarifying question. I was trying to raise my hand. Sorry, I was trying to follow
All right.
the raise hand rule.
Was that Supervisor Cronk?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I just want to be clear that the capital fund obviously is different than the operations fund. And so with the recent internal transfer of funds, approximately $100,000 from the overtime budget that was not used to the investigative services for the potential for the forensic audit, that transfer occurred internally. That came before us at the last meeting. My clarifying question is, this is completely different because it's part of the capital projects, and if this was not utilized to fund these particular projects, which I agree are extremely important, could and would the money come from anywhere else?
Supervisor Pagonis.
I don't understand the last part of that question, the could or would the money come from anywhere else. Right now, we have additional capacity in our Fund 405, which is our capital fund. So that represents unspent borrowed dollars because the projects that it was borrowed for have come in under budget or under the anticipated budget. So this is additional capacity within that fund. And we have two projects within the Sheriff's Department that are very high need. And so we are just attempting to be efficient. And yes, you're correct. The capital fund is different from operational.
Supervisor Cronk.
Yeah, thank you. That was my question. So operational meaning moving from overtime to investigative services is completely separate, and that money could not go towards what these are deemed, which is capital projects, correct? They can't intermingle?
I wouldn't say they can't intermingle, but what we have here is capital dollars for capital projects. And what the sheriff has, now the sheriff controls his budget, his operational budget. He's a constitutional officer, and the sheriff made his own internal transfer from overtime to investigation. So they're really two separate buckets.
Okay. Supervisor Cronk.
That's my clarifying question was, could the money have been transferred for these capital projects instead?
I don't think so.
Supervisor Pagonis.
Well, I suppose technically they could.
There's also money that's already been borrowed, so it would, if it wasn't used for this, it could then been used for something else.
We're going to proceed to a vote on this. Supervisors, please unmute. All those in favor of file 83, please indicate by saying aye.
Chair Snyder, we need a poll vote.
Poll vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. I think I'm losing it over here. So we're talking about file 83, and that requires Supervisor Pagonis a 2/3 vote, correct? Supervisor Pagonis?
Correct. Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. So Samantha, please set up a poll for this.
It should be in front of you. Supervisor Schneider, excuse me, what is your vote?
Yes.
Anton, yes. Thank you.
Russell is yes if you can't see mine.
How are we doing, Samantha?
I have 24 yeses and 3 no.
The motion passes. Next is file 84.
A resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing perimeters for the sale of not to exceed $14 million general obligation refund.
We lost you there at the end. You're muted. We didn't hear the last few words.
Refunding.
General obligation refunding bonds.
Thank you. Okay. Motion.
Henning approves.
Henning moves. Second. Second.
Dunning.
Yeah. Dunning, second.
Second by Supervisor Dunning. Thank you. Explanation. Supervisor Pagolis.
Thank you, Chairman Smyer. You did hear an explanation earlier today. There are just a couple of things that I want to point out. These are, what we're doing is a refunding of 2011 borrowing that was done for the construction of the jail. This borrowing is not really callable until September 2021. So what we're doing today is locking in a current interest rate that will then apply when the refunding occurs, which we actually intend to do in June. The reason why it's referred to as a parameters resolution is because what we're doing is we are putting in a range to have savings no less than $1.5 million. And we are now authorizing our staff to proceed tomorrow or the following day with Morgan Stanley for the purposes of implementing this. If the savings is less than $1.5 million, then they won't proceed. But we believe right now, as of today, it exceeded 1.7 million, and it would be present value savings. And so we believe this is very favorable. One thing to note in the chart that Sean Lenz put up on the screen, it noted it was not callable. We're going to have this debt for the next 10 years, which is what the 2011 debt would have been anyway, but we can't refund it at a future time. And so right now what we're talking about is moving forward with refunding some old debt. The rates on the debt that we currently have is in the 3 to 4% range, and the rate we're looking at is in a 0.6 to a 1.73 range. So I strongly recommend it. It will save the county at least $1.5 million in interest rates. We need a 3/4 vote, and so we need a poll vote.
Correct. Supervisor Coffey, your hand is raised. Do you wish to speak?
That was on the last one. I'm sorry.
Oh. Take your hand down. Okay.
Oops, sorry. I'll do that.
So, Samantha, please set up the poll vote for this. Thank you.
Anton, yes.
Schneider, yes.
I'm waiting on Supervisor Chilson.
Is he still on?
I do not have a question on the screen. I will give you my verbal vote as yes, but I do not have the poll question.
We'll take the verbal vote. Thank you. Samantha?
I have 28 yeses.
Okay. And That's unanimous, I believe, right? We don't have a
Right.
29th person, right?
Right.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you. So the motion passes on a unanimous vote. Supervisors, we've reached the end of our agenda. I want to thank you very much for your patience tonight. This has been a long and grueling meeting, and we have some interesting interruptions, which I hope I can resolve and you can resolve. Thank you. We are now adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.